the Syrian Arab Republic. السيد كسابة كورتشي رئيس الجمعية العامة، أهنئكم على انتخابكم رئيساً للجمعية العامة في دولة الحالية.
I congratulate you on your election to preside over the current session of the General Assembly. I thank your predecessor, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, for his presidency over the past session. I would also like to thank the Secretary General for his efforts during his mandate in accordance with the provisions of the UN Charter. Mr. President, today we find ourselves at a critical, dangerous point in international relations. Conflicts, wars, and threats to international peace and security are on the rise. Terrorism and chaos have been spreading. The global economy and food security are under threat. Climate change has increased. This is the result of attempts by some countries to impose their hegemony over other countries, to hoard their resources and wealth, and to implement their straitjacketed agendas by investing in terrorism and by imposing lethal weapons and putting a stranglehold on economies, completely flouting international law. There has been occupation, there have been wars. And the excuse has been to spread democracy and support human rights, and yet other states have been destroyed, innocents have been killed. What has happened in our region is just but one example. The terrorists, these people support, call these people the moderates who are seeking freedom. And yet these terrorists were actually tools used to destroy other countries which are not subject to their agendas. They have called for smart sanctions, knowing that these sanctions are simply methods for collective punishment or for killings against people who are supporting their own homeland, calling for sovereignty. This is what's happened in Syria by undermining access to medication, to food, to fuel, to basic goods. The Syrian people, as I say, are just one example. Ladies and gentlemen, we see this very unfortunate situation, and yet we must take a decision. We must be responsible at this critical turning point in history so that we can ensure a better future for ourselves, but also for future generations, and to set up a multipolar world order where everyone is working under the auspices of the UN Charter and supporting its purposes and principles. In this appeal, we know what we're speaking about, because war against Syria ultimately was an attempt by the West to maintain control of the world. But this war, which aimed at breaking the will of Syria to isolate it from the world, has failed. And yet, this experience has been painful for the Syrian people. For more than 10 years, the Syrian people have seen organized terrorism supported by a government everyone is familiar with. There's been illegal military interference, and we have economically been besieged, and unilateral coercive measures have been taken, ruthless measures. Mr. President, We
شهدنا
hoped
مزيدا
to
من
see
الممارسات
peace and stability in our
الإسرائيلية التي
region,
دفعت
but
المنطقة
on the
إلى
contrary, we've
مستويات غير
seen
مسبوقة من
more Israeli
التوتر وعدم
practices which
الاستقرار
have pushed the
وذلك
region
سواء من
to an
خلال ارتكابها
unprecedented level
المجازر
of tension and
وتصعيد
instability. There have
عدوانها
been
العسكري على
massacres.
الأراضي الفلسطينية
There's been an
المدنيين أو من
escalation of
خلال
military
الاستمرار في
aggression against
سياسات
the
الاستيطان
Palestinian
والتهويد
territory and
والحصار
against
والاعتقال
civilians, and there have been
التعسفي والتهجير
settlement
القسري
policies, Judaism policies,
والتمييز
besiegements, arbitrary attentions,
إن
forced
ممارسات
displacement,
إسرائيل
and racial
تشكل جرائم لم يعد من
discrimination. These Israeli
المقبول
practices
الاستمرار
are
في الإفلات
crimes,
من العقاب عليها
and it is unacceptable for
تؤكد
these
سوريا من
crimes
جديد بأنها لن تتراجع عن
to
وقوفها
go
إلى جانب الشعب
unanswered,
الفلسطيني
and
الشقيق
those who are
في
responsible
نضاله
should be held
لتحرير أرضه
accountable.
المحتلة
We stand by the brotherly Palestinian people as they fight to free their occupied territories and to establish their sovereign independent state throughout their territory with Jerusalem as capital, but also to guarantee the right of Palestinian refugees to return home under international law and General Assembly resolutions. We also support the Palestinian approach to become a full-fledged member in the United Nations. This is something we have looked forward to for a long time, and we hope that some members of the Security Council will not undermine these efforts. Mr. President, since the occupation of the Syrian Golan in 1967 and until today, Israel has exerted the worst serious systematic violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, including by settlements, by changing the demographic composition, by imposing Israeli nationality and ownership documents by force over the Golan population. There's also been the plundering of natural resources in the Golan, where Israel has buried nuclear waste and where Israel has taken over land to set up wind farms. All of this is well documented. Israel has added a new chapter to this dark chapter by supporting terrorist organizations, including the Al-Nusra Front and the Al-Qaeda and Daesh groups, but also through repeated aggressions against Syrian territory. Yes, Israel has supported Daesh and the Al-Nusra Front. Israel has targeted civilian installations repeatedly and methodologically, including civilian ports. This undermines the peace and security in the region and in the world, and it endangers the lives of civilians, but also the safety of civil aviation in the region and in the world. The Israeli leaders who have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity do not have the right to declare that they question these civilian and humanitarian rights in international courts, continuing to support and to say nothing about Israeli practices, and those who claim to be the guardians of international humanitarian law and international human rights law have been accomplices in these crimes, and they show the double standards applied. Syria will exercise its legitimate right to defend its land and its people in every possible way, so that the authorities of the Israeli occupation are held accountable for their crimes. The occupied Syrian Golan is in the heart of every Syrian. Our right to recover the entire Golan territory up to the 1967 border is an undying right. It is guaranteed in accordance with international law and relevant UN resolutions, including Security Council Resolution 47 of 1981. Ladies and gentlemen, illegal military presence on Syrian territory runs counter to international law and the UN Charter. This presence must cease immediately. Combating terrorism in all its manifestations and ultimately uprooting terrorism can only take place through cooperation and coordination with the Syrian state, respecting its sovereignty, its independence, its territorial integrity and unity. We cannot combat terrorism through international illegal coalitions which violate the sovereignty of states, which destroys villages and cities, which carries out massacres against civilians, which plunders national wealth and supports terrorists. We cannot combat terrorism by occupying other territories and applying forced displacement and changing the demographics, nor setting up so-called safe zones and working with terrorists, or by collectively punishing people by cutting water off to civilians. The separatist militants who still cherish these ideals must be aware of the reality, and they must abstain from counting on foreign support. Those who do not work with their homeland have no homeland. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, since the 2011 crisis, the Syrian state has called for national and local reconciliation, calling for a return to normal throughout Syria in order to promote national unity and consolidate cohesiveness in the Syrian society. In this way, 21 amnesty decrees have been published, particularly the Legislative Decree No. 7 of 2022, decreed by President Bashar al-Assad, President of the Syrian Arab Republic, an amnesty for terrorist crimes committed by Syrians, with the exception of crimes which have led to deaths. This amnesty is particularly important because of its legal, political, and social nature. It is an effort by the Syrian state to ensure national reconciliation, to have a social agreement, and to ensure lasting stability. Syrians will continue their efforts through this approach. It has been effective on the ground, and it has enabled the return of many Syrians to a normal life alongside all other Syrians. Despite these difficult circumstances which Syria has known, my country has honored constitutional deadlines. A few days ago, and before coming to New York, we held democratic elections for local councils with 59,000 candidates,
مما يعكس اتساع المشاركة الشعبية الديمقراطية وتعزيز وتعميق الإدارة المحلية في كل قرية ومدينة
great popular participation and support for democracy and decentralization in every region and governance in every city and town. Mr. President, Syria has welcomed efforts and initiatives under the political process, and in this regard, Syria reiterates its support for the meetings which are being held under the Astana Agreement. We also welcome the results
من تموز لعام 2022
of the Tehran summit held on the 19th of July 2022, and during that summit,
وكذلك التأكيد على الوقوف ضد المخططات
we declared the attachment, the commitment to Syria's territorial integrity and the rejection of separatist plans supported by terrorist groups. However, all of this will remain dead letter if Turkey continues not to respect these results and even the results of the Astana Agreement. Moreover, Syria is following with interest the work being done by the Constitutional Committee, which was set up through the Sochi National Dialogue in 2018. The Special Envoy for Syria must play the role as a facilitator for inter-Syrian dialogue in this process with Syrian ownership and in accordance with the mandate. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, surely you know that before the terrorist war, which was carried out against Syria in 2011. Syria was one of the safest, most prosperous and stablest countries in the world. We were self-sufficient and we could meet the needs of our people exceptionally in the region, be it in the area of education, health, public services, but this unique war has changed the stakes. We have seen an unbearable humanitarian crisis, and today, what was the cause of all of that? The answer is quite clear now. The primary cause is terrorism and then unilateral coercive measures imposed by Western states and the plundering of the wealth of the Syrian people. One example is that according to estimates, the direct and indirect losses in the oil sector, gas sector in Syria since 2011 reaches
بلغت ما قيمته
up to
107 مليار دولار أمريكي. 107
has reached 107 billion American dollars. Let me repeat that, 107 billion American dollars. We are seeking compensation for those damages. In this world, we must have a world of peace and security, and not a world for monsters or up monsters. The Syrian state, Mr. President, is doing everything possible to manage the humanitarian situation on the ground, to rebuild what terrorism has destroyed, and to ensure the return of Syrian refugees, and we offer facilities to support humanitarian aid provision by the United Nations as quickly as possible in accordance with Security Council Resolution 2642. We estimate, despite all of our reservations, that these resolutions may be an additional step towards improving the humanitarian situation in Syria and to bolster the access to basic services. However, this will depend on the implementation by Western states of the provisions of the resolution, in particular increasing humanitarian aid and quick reaction projects for water, for sanitation, for housing, education. With the previous resolution 2585, the implementation of these projects can only happen if the Western states continue to wish to support development in Syria, and not if they continue to set up hindrances and obstacles, including through unilateral coercive measures or so-called economic sanctions. Mr. President, Syria reiterates its position on the special Russian military operation in Ukraine and the right of Russia to defend itself and to secure its national territory. We are convinced that the Russian Federation is defending not only itself, but justice and the rights of humanity, the rights of everyone to reject unipolar hegemony. We support the return to the nuclear agreement for Iran, which the United States illegally withdrew from unilaterally. We also support the constructive approach adopted by Iran on this matter. And we call upon Western authorities to satisfy the legitimate requests of Iran. We continue to support the principle of a united China and support China's position with regard to foreign interference in its domestic affairs in Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Xinjiang. We insist on the inalienable right of China to take necessary measures to defend its sovereignty, in particular with regard to the unprecedented escalation and the policy of provocation carried out by the United States of America. My country condemns the embargo against Cuba, which has gone on for decades, including the bill on trade with the enemy. I don't know whether or not the Cuban or the Syrian people or the Russian people, I don't know why that law was promulgated. But we also call for an end to the American military maneuvers on the Korean Peninsula, which has exacerbated tensions. We also call for a lifting of all unilateral coercive measures imposed by the West on Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Belarus, Nicaragua,
في كل أنحاء العالم وضد بلاد سوريا
the DPRK, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, everywhere in the world, including my country, Syria. This is economic terrorism, and in its brutal nature, it is equal to armed terrorism, either legally or in terms of the inhumane consequences on our people. We call for an end to the attempts to become involved in the internal affairs of these countries and to respect their sovereignty in accordance with international law and the UN Charter. Mr. President, in conclusion, our world has known exceptional circumstances in the past few years. There have been considerable challenges in terms of politics, economics, health, climate change as well. Today, we are seeing tensions and an escalation internationally of those tensions and threats. The world is headed into the unknown. If we do not meet these challenges together, if we do not respond to the aspirations of our people, and if we cannot ensure security and stability, prosperity and sustainable development everywhere, the purpose of leaving no one behind should not be an empty slogan. We are convinced that in order to meet all of these goals, we must ensure first that some Western states understand that the true great powers are not powerful because of their military, but because they respect international charters and because humanity prevails over selfishness, over colonization. And once these countries have truly understood that we are living in the same world where the interests and securities of all countries depend on the interests of other countries. Thank you.
I thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Jean-Claude Gakosso, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Francophonie and Congolese abroad of the Congo.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames, Messieurs, le postulat universel qu'est le multilatéralisme et que notre organisation incarne depuis sa création n'a jamais été aussi gravement battu en brèche qu'il est aujourd'hui sous nos yeux. En effet, nous assistons à une intensification sans précédent des crises partout dans le monde. Nous assistons à la multiplication des conflits et à leur complexification. Nous assistons à une insécurité alimentaire inédite et à de dangereuses menaces sur la biodiversité. Nous assistons même à des velléités de remise en question des engagements pourtant pris collégialement et entériné ici même dans cette salle sur la protection de l'environnement et la préservation de la planète, notre maison commune. Et comme si cela n'était pas assez, nous assistons à l'exacerbation des dissensions et à des inimitiés entre les pays membres permanents du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies, Conseil dont la vocation principale est pourtant de maintenir la paix dans le monde en travaillant dans la cohésion. Face à cette situation qui aggrave nos fragilités communes et qui met en évidence nos vulnérabilités collectives, seule une approche consensuelle et solidaire Une approche apaisée et coordonnée peut nous aider à trouver les vraies réponses à ces problèmes. Je crois que le thème autour duquel se tient notre débat général nous en donne de réelles possibilités. En effet, en appelant à des solutions transformatrices, ce débat interpelle fortement la conscience collective sur ces défis de plus en plus nombreux qui nous assiègent quotidiennement et qui prennent parfois une tournure dramatique. Il n'est que de songer à l'actualité de la guerre en Ukraine, à ces projections apocalyptiques, non sans fondement, que font aujourd'hui les stratèges et autres experts militaires sur un possible retournement tragique de ces terribles événements. Monsieur le Président, en raison de l'énorme risque de désastre nucléaire que ces événements font peser sur l'ensemble de la planète, non seulement les protagonistes dans ce conflit, mais également les puissances étrangères qui peuvent influencer le cours des événements dans le sens de l'apaisement, devraient tous tempérer leurs ardeurs, cesser d'attiser les braises et tourner le dos à cette sorte de vanité des puissants qui ferme jusque-là la porte au dialogue. Sous l'égide des Nations Unies, tous devraient s'engager sans délai à des négociations de paix, des négociations justes, sincères et équitables. Depuis le congrès de Vienne, après Waterloo, nous le savons, les guerres se terminent toujours autour d'une table, toujours autour des négociations. Le monde a urgemment besoin de ces négociations pour éviter que les affrontements en cours, déjà si dévastateurs, n'aillent encore crescendo et fassent basculer l'humanité dans ce qui pourrait être un cataclysme irrémédiable, c'est-à-dire une guerre nucléaire généralisée et qui échapperait au contrôle des grandes puissances elles-mêmes. Cette guerre au sujet de laquelle Einstein, grand théoricien de l'atome, disait avec gravité qu'elle serait, si elle devait avoir lieu, la dernière bataille que les hommes se seraient livrés sur Terre. Monsieur le Président, la paix, disait Nelson Mandela, l'homme de l'éternel pardon. La paix est un chemin long, mais elle n'a pas d'alternative. Elle n'a pas de prix. En réalité, les Russes et les Ukrainiens n'ont guère d'autre choix que d'emprunter ce chemin, celui de la paix. Et d'ailleurs, nous aussi avec eux, car nous devons être partout dans le monde des légions entières, solidaires, pugnaces et capables d'imposer au lobby de la guerre l'option inconditionnelle de la paix. Теперь хотел бы прямо и специально обратиться к вам, моим дорогим русским и украинским друзьям. Слишком пролилась кровь, слишком пролилась священная кровь ваших нежных детей. Пора остановить эти массовые разрушения. Пора остановить эту войну. Весь мир на вас смотрит. Пришло время бороться за жизнь, как вы вместе мужественно и самоотверженно сражались против нацистов во время Второй мировой войны, особенно в Ленинграде, в Сталинграде, в Курске и в Берлине. Подумайте о молодежи ваших двух стран. Подумайте о судьбе будущих поколений. Пришло время бороться за мир. Пришло время бороться за них. Пожалуйста, Dajte míru,
give
nastojaši
peace
šans.
a real chance
Sivodnja že, pa ni pozna.
today
Для всех
before
нас.
it is too late for us all.
Скромно я вас
I
прошу.
humbly ask this of you.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
ce que je viens de dire,
what I have just
y compris
said
dans mon russe
in
approximatif,
my
ce que je viens de dire au sujet
basic
des
Russian,
événements
what
en
I have just said
Ukraine,
about the events in
peut
Ukraine
autoriser à tracer un
could allow
parallèle,
one to draw a
quoique à
parallel,
une échelle
although
totalement
perhaps at a
différente,
completely different
avec la
scale,
situation
with the
dramatique
dramatic
que vit la Libye
situation
depuis
that
2011.
Libya has been dealing with
Une
since
situation pour
2011,
laquelle
a
le
situation
président Denis Sassou
in
Nguesso,
which the
président de la République du Congo,
President Denis Sassou
s'investit
Nguesso,
sans
President of the
compter
Republic of Congo,
depuis des
has
années
been so
au nom de l'Union
invested for
africaine.
many years on behalf of the African
Les efforts
Union.
de paix qu'il déploie dans le
The
cadre de
peace
cet épineux
efforts that he is
dossier
carrying out in
se sont
this,
encore
on this thorny
poursuivis
issue
récemment,
have
les
continued
14 et
recently
15 juillet
on the
2022,
14th and 15th
dans le
of
cadre de
July,
consultations qui
2022,
ont réuni à Brazzaville
in Brazzaville,
plusieurs
during
acteurs
consultations
représentant
which brought
l'essentiel
together several
des sensibilités
actors
politiques
who
et sociales
represent the
libyennes,
core
et
of
ce,
the
dans le
Libyan
but
social and political
d'amener les
views. The
protagonistes
goal here is to
à se
encourage the
parler,
protagonists
à
here to
rapprocher leur
speak together, to
compréhension
bring
des défis
their
auxquels
understandings of the
leur pays est
challenges their
confronté depuis
country
le
has
raté
been
électoral
facing since
du
the failed
24 décembre
elections on the
2021.
24th of December 2021, to bring their understandings closer.
La conférence de réconciliation interlibyenne que vise la médiation africaine n'aura de sens que si elle est inclusive, constructive et consensuelle. Elle doit permettre à nos frères et sœurs libyens de cesser de se regarder en chiens de faïence, de se pardonner, de renouer avec la vertu du dialogue et de donner la prépondérance à la justice, soubassement de cette Libye renaissante dont ils sont appelés à écrire l'histoire nouvelle. Je voudrais, du haut de cette tribune, saluer la nomination de M. Abdoulaye Bathily comme représentant spécial du secrétaire général des Nations Unies en Libye. Je puis déjà l'assurer du soutien inconditionnel du président Denis Sassou Nguesso, qui préside le comité de haut niveau de l'Union africaine pour la Libye. Monsieur le Président, les forêts du bassin du Congo, qui constituent le deuxième réservoir écologique de la planète, et que nous préservons comme la prunelle des yeux depuis des années. Les forêts du Congo attendent toujours d'être pourvues d'un soutien robuste et qui soit à la hauteur de l'enjeu existentiel qu'elles représentent. On ne rappellera jamais assez les engagements pris depuis Copenhague jusqu'à Glasgow, en passant par l'accord de Paris. Engagements pris avec enthousiasme, mais à ce jour, toujours non tenus par les pays riches, ceux-là même qui sont responsables de 80% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Mais malgré cela, tout en nous préparant à la COP27 que l'Afrique va abriter en novembre prochain, nous nourrissons l'espoir que cette fois au moins, loin des discours de commisération dont nous nous sommes habitués, loin des formules convenues et des engagements de façade, nous nourrissons l'espoir que cette fois enfin, des ressources significatives seront mobilisées en faveur des pays pauvres que le dérèglement climatique a rendu encore plus vulnérables. En tout cas, avec un taux de déforestation des plus faibles au monde, puisqu'il n'est que de 0,06%, mon pays, la République du Congo, pour sa part, joue à fond sa partition. Et elle continuera à le faire au nom de la préservation de l'environnement, au nom de la survie de l'humanité. La mise en place du Fonds bleu pour le bassin du Congo participe sur le plan régional de cet engagement. Et en association avec le gouvernement du Royaume-Uni, qui assure la présidence de la COP26, le gouvernement de mon pays projette de lancer dans les prochaines semaines un forum politique intitulé « Partenariat des leaders sur les forêts et le climat ». Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et messieurs,
Mr. President, ladies
je
and
ne saurais
gentlemen,
clore mon propos
I
et
could
quitter
not
cette tribune
conclude my
sans
statement
évoquer
and
deux
leave this
situations
rostrum without
qui
mentioning
devraient sans
two
cesse
situations which should
interpeller notre
unceasingly
conscience.
appeal to
Deux
our
situations devant
conscience.
lesquelles,
Two situations
moralement,
that
nous ne
we
pouvons baisser les bras.
morally cannot give up on.
La première situation concerne cette réforme du Conseil
The
de
first
sécurité
situation concerns
des Nations Unies,
the United
devenue une sorte de
Nations
serpent de
Security
mer,
Council
une
reform, which has
réforme
become
dont
a sort
chacun
of
glose à l'envi
broken record
et dont l'aboutissement
that
semble
everyone
chaque
glosses
jour
over
s'éloigner de son
and
noble
whose conclusion
objectif,
seems every day to move
alors
further away
que
from
la
its
prise en
noble
compte
goals,
de l'Afrique
while
dans la
the
gestion des
inclusion
affaires du
of
monde
Africa in the
s'impose
management of
d'elle-même
world
aujourd'hui.
affairs is self-evident.
L'Afrique doit en effet
today.
prendre toute sa
Africa
place
must indeed
dans le concert des
take
nations.
its place in the community of
Penser le
nations.
contraire,
To think
c'est tout
otherwise
simplement faire preuve
is
d'égoïsme
simply to exhibit
et ramer à
selfishness
contre-courant
and
de
to row
l'histoire.
against the current of
De
history.
même, continuer à tergiverser
Continuing
sur
to
l'idée d'admettre deux
prevaricate
pays
over the idea
africains
of admitting
comme
two African
membres
countries as
permanents à
permanent
part entière
members
du Conseil de
to
sécurité des
the
Nations Unies,
United Nations Security
ce n'est
Council
pas autre chose que
is
faire
nothing
volontairement
more than
le choix
willingly
de couvrir du
choosing to
discrédit
discredit
notre
our
prestigieuse
prestigious
organisation.
organization.
À nous donc, représentants des pays alliés,
We, the
réunis
representatives
au sein
of
des Nations
allied
Unies,
countries meeting
de faire
here
le
within the
choix de
United
l'honneur,
Nations must choose
ici et
honor
maintenant,
here
et d'entrer
and
dans
today.
l'histoire par
And
la
we
grande
must
porte,
go down
en nous
in
éloignant à
history
jamais
by
de ces
ridding
préjugés
ourselves once and for
moyenâgeux
all
et
of these
abscons sur
medieval
l'Afrique,
and cryptic
des préjugés qui n'ont que
prejudices
trop longtemps
against Africa
humilié cette partie
that
du
have
monde.
for too long
La deuxième
humiliated
situation,
and
Monsieur le
unjustly
Président,
treated this part of the world.
concerne
The second
ce sempiternel
situation
embargo sur
concerns the
Cuba,
endless embargo on Cuba.
un embargo qui
An
dure
embargo that
depuis le
has
milieu du
lasted
siècle dernier
since
et qui
the
continue de faire endurer
second half of the last
d'indicibles
century, which
souffrances.
continues to cause
au peuple de ce
indescribable
pays.
suffering to the people of this country.
Il y a bien longtemps, Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
que cet
President, this
embargo
embargo,
totalement
which is totally
anachronique et
anachronistic
désuet,
and
aurait dû
obsolete,
être aboli.
should have long since been abolished.
Au nom de mon pays,
On behalf of my
j'en
country,
appelle une fois encore du
I
haut de
once
cette
again
tribune
call from this
à
rostrum
la sagesse
on
du
the
peuple
wisdom
américain
of the
et à la
American
sagacité
people
de ses dirigeants.
and its leaders.
Des dirigeants qui, comme tout le monde
Leaders who,
sait,
as we
n'ont
know,
pour la plupart rien à
have for the
voir
most part nothing
avec
to do
cet avatar suranné
with
de
this
la guerre froide.
old-fashioned embodiment of the Cold
À ce
War.
sujet, et je vais terminer par là, Monsieur le Président,
On
je
this
voudrais me
subject,
tourner
and I wish to conclude
très
here, Mr. President, I
respectueusement
wish to very
vers le président
respectfully
Biden,
speak to
qui a
President
longuement
Biden,
prôné l'idéal de paix
who has long
à cette même tribune la
promoted
semaine dernière.
the idea of
Monsieur le
peace and
Président,
spoke of it last week at this
prenez
very same rostrum.
votre
Mr.
courage.
President, be courageous.
Sans plus attendre,
Without
tourner
any
cette
further
page
delay,
sombre des
close
relations avec
this
Cuba
dark
qui
chapter of
appartient
your
au passé.
relations with Cuba, which belongs
En
in the
agissant
past.
ainsi, vous ouvrirez
By doing so,
indiscutablement
You will
une
undeniably
perspective
open a
nouvelle
new
à l'histoire
perspective
glorieuse de
in
votre
the
beau
glorious
pays.
history of your beautiful country.
Et la postérité, j'en suis persuadé,
Posterity, I am convinced,
vous sera infiniment
will
reconnaissante.
thank you.
Je vous remercie.
I thank you.
I thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Francophonie and Congolese abroad of the Congo. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Osman Saleh Mohammed, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Eritrea.
Mr. President, honorable heads of state and government, distinguished participants, good morning. Allow me first to express our congratulations for your election as President of the 77th session of the General Assembly. I also want to congratulate His Excellency Abdullah Shahid for his successful stewardship of the Assembly during his Presidency of Hope in the 76th session. The annual session of the United Nations General Assembly held under the fitting theme, Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges, is taking place at an exceedingly preoccupying time of profound, intertwined, and multiple crises of epic proportion. These calamities have adversely impacted all corners of our global village. In the past 2.5 years, the COVID-19 pandemic had exacted a huge human toll in the global terms. It also inculcated chronic economic difficulties and structural setbacks through domestic economic downturns and disruption of international supply chains. And while this scourge persists, we are confronted these days with equally perilous fallouts of climate change and global warming, which are exacerbating the already precarious situation. Furthermore, cyclical conflicts, which have assumed an exceptionally dangerous and almost apocalyptic dimensions with the war in Ukraine, have ratcheted up the impending crisis to unprecedented levels. The COVID-19 pandemic aside, the other interlocking variables and dimensions of the crisis constitute the cumulative consequences and telltale symptoms of a tenuous and highly flawed global governance architecture. They are byproducts and manifestations of systemic failure of the unipolar order or unipolar world order that has prevailed for over 30 years. In reality, the much vaunted rules-based international order represents a skewed set of duplicitous, asymmetric, and non-consensual norms and regulations. The fact is, it was essentially designed to advance and safeguard the privileges of its principal architects, to the exclusion of the majority of other nations and peoples. Its rather monolithic and condescending ideological perspective gives no room and space to historical context, distinct realities and cultures, and above all to independent policy choices of other sovereign peoples and nations. Indeed, all other sovereign peoples and nations are expected to fully adhere and kowtow both in their international relations and domestic policies to the gold standards stipulated in the flimsy rules-based international order. In the final analysis, the costly wars of intervention, especially in Africa and the Middle East, in the past 30 years, heavy-handed meddling in domestic affairs, imposition of illicit and unilateral sanctions, distortion and weaponization of human rights, in brief, all the episodes of international and regional instability emanate from and are direct derivatives of the faulty global governance architecture. The negative ramifications of this dysfunctional system are not confined to the sovereign nations and peoples of the global south. For extreme and ludicrous inequalities where less than 1% of the population own 99% of national wealth, unbridled consumerism, which has bred and continues to aggravate climate change. Atomization of societies that have literally decimated social compassion and community care by fostering exclusive and unnatural individualism are dangerous trends that will ultimately undermine the social fabric and stability in individual countries and our global village at large. Distinguished participants, my rather extensive perspectives on the flaws of the global governance structure do not stem solely from general and abstract desire of my government to seek timely and urgent remedies as underlined in the theme of this General Assembly. Eritrea has indeed borne the brunt of this unfair international order through illicit sanctions, the use of surrogate forces to create a situation of permanent conflict and instability, as well as the weaponization of human rights to isolate and ostracize the young nation. Excellencies, as we all agree, the gravity of the interlocking problems that our global village has to grapple with is so immense, warranting urgent and comprehensive remedial action. We are really living on borrowed time. The prevailing global governance architecture has lost legitimacy and corroded vital global equilibrium that is crucial for continuity and sustainability. In the event, it behoves us to rise up to the occasion to summon the requisite political goodwill in order to roll back and rectify the dangerous trend. We must recognize the resources, the technological know-how at the disposal of humanity are more than what is required if we set our minds for an inclusive and compassionate world order. In this respect, and in our modest view, one, our global village and the United Nations system must devise a new international order that is anchored on consensus with the full and equal participation of its constituencies. Two, the sacrosanct principles of the equality of all member states and the respect of the sovereignty and political independence of nations and peoples must be upheld. Three, equitable representation of all member states in all decision-making international bodies must be guaranteed through viable and sustainable modalities and mechanisms. Four, selective and partial parameters that impede collective well-being and the fostering of a compassionate social system will require thorough review. I thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Eritrea. I now give the floor to His Excellency Francisco Bustillo, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Uruguay.
Señor Presidente, señor Secretario General, distinguidos miembros de la Asamblea General. Hace exactamente 2 años, al conmemorarse el 75 aniversario de las Naciones Unidas, transitamos el primer año de la pandemia. Fue un año lleno de incertidumbres y de temores, debido a la irrupción inesperada de un virus que aún hoy sigue dejando una secuela histórica en pérdida de vidas humanas y graves consecuencias para la salud de nuestras poblaciones y daños para nuestras economías. Desde entonces la situación internacional no solo no ha mejorado, sino que han aparecido nuevas fuentes de tensión que han dificultado avanzar en la recuperación económica y hacer frente a los importantes costos sociales originados por la pandemia. La invasión militar de Ucrania por parte de la Federación de Rusia es injustificable. Nuestro país lo ha condenado en los términos más firmes como una clara violación de los principios sobre los cuales hemos construido esta organización y que deben ser respetados por todos sus miembros. Es imperioso que la Federación de Rusia cese las hostilidades y se retire a la mayor brevedad del territorio ucraniano. Las partes en este conflicto deben esforzarse por volver a la mesa de negociaciones para resolver sus diferencias pacíficamente, tal como lo estipula la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Entre tanto, los efectos negativos del conflicto armado se hacen sentir sobre múltiples aspectos de la realidad internacional y pesan cada vez más sobre la vida cotidiana de millones de personas. El impacto sobre el comercio internacional alimenta las tendencias recesivas de muchos países. El déficit de productos agrícolas afecta seriamente a los países importadores de menor desarrollo y la falta de acceso a los mercados mundiales genera inseguridad alimentaria en varias regiones del mundo. Otros estados experimentan desabastecimiento de energía o encarecimiento de los precios de estos suministros. Con ello, se afectan las condiciones de vida de millones de personas, pero también esta situación ha creado una nueva amenaza para el medio ambiente. Aunque sus resultados no colmaron todas las expectativas generadas en la COP26 Glasgow, celebrada en noviembre de 2021, se alcanzaron algunos resultados auspiciosos. Además, quedó claro que los países no han renunciado al objetivo de limitar el calentamiento global a 1,5 grados centígrados por encima de los niveles preindustriales. Las discusiones en la COP de Glasgow tendrán nuevas instancias de debate en un futuro próximo. Esperamos que los altos niveles de ambición sean respetados por todos los países y que se cumpla con la promesa de movilizar los recursos financieros para apoyar las medidas de adaptación y mitigación contra el cambio climático. De otro modo, la comunidad internacional habrá perdido otra oportunidad, quizás la última, para enfrentar una de sus mayores amenazas. En caso de frustrarse este esfuerzo, las generaciones futuras tendrán el legítimo derecho de decir que nosotros, quienes hemos gobernado en este siglo, no hemos estado a la altura de nuestras responsabilidades políticas. En este sentido, quiero renovar el apoyo de Uruguay al Acuerdo de París y nuestro firme compromiso con sus objetivos y sus metas concretas. Ese es el camino común que hemos definido y es necesario un mayor empeño para llevarlo a cabo. En este contexto y ante desafíos tan importantes, el multilateralismo no es una palabra hueca o carente de significación. Es esencial para ello el fortalecimiento del sistema multilateral del que todos somos parte y que constituye un activo en común. Es necesario reforzar y mejorar los mecanismos de alcance global y regional para dotarlos de mayor eficacia y alcance preventivo. La comunidad internacional enfrenta hoy 3 retos de gran magnitud: la paz y la seguridad internacional, el medio ambiente y la salud mundial. El sistema multilateral es esencial para abordar estos desafíos, no solo como principio inspirador, sino también como una herramienta clave para que nuestros esfuerzos resulten eficaces. En este sentido, quiero ratificar una vez más nuestro compromiso con el multilateralismo. Señor Presidente, a pesar de la coyuntura adversa, este año 2022 debería significar también un hito para la Agenda 2030 y la consecución de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Ya estamos transcurriendo la década de acción y es imprescindible pasar de la retórica a la concreción de las metas. Conforme con estos propósitos, Uruguay presentó el quinto informe nacional voluntario que rinde cuenta sobre los logros y metas alcanzados durante el 2021 por Uruguay. Estos informes constituyen una clara reafirmación del compromiso de mi país con la Agenda 2030 y con el cumplimiento de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Uruguay no escatima esfuerzos en la tarea de formular políticas públicas activas y de mejorar indicadores relacionados con estas materias. Persisten en el sistema internacional deficiencias que afectan y debilitan el esfuerzo que se ha hecho en pos del desarrollo económico y social de nuestros países. En muchas oportunidades, el establecimiento de determinados criterios para el despliegue de la cooperación internacional termina generando efectos adversos, indeseados y altamente negativos. Muchos países, entre los que se encuentra Uruguay, se han visto perjudicados por una concepción arcaica del desarrollo basada en el ingreso per cápita, resultando ello en un ejercicio de graduación que en la práctica constituye un castigo para los países que se encuentran en transición hacia el desarrollo y que han logrado una mejor retribución de su ingreso. Señor Presidente, los Estados tienen la responsabilidad primordial en la protección de los derechos humanos de su población. Nos provoca un profundo rechazo ver que en muchos lugares del mundo los derechos básicos de millones de hombres, mujeres y niños son violados en forma flagrante. Y más aún cuando los perpetradores de esas atrocidades son sus propios gobernantes que abusan de los mecanismos represivos y violentan sus obligaciones internacionales en la materia. Esta realidad nos resulta más dura y perturbadora al tener en nuestra propia región de América Latina y el Caribe ejemplo de esa naturaleza. No existe foro más adecuado que la Asamblea General para reafirmar la vocación humanista y humanitaria del Uruguay y reiterar su compromiso constante y permanente con la agenda de derechos humanos, exigiendo que las obligaciones internacionales contraídas por los miembros de esta organización sean plenamente respetadas por todos los actores de la comunidad internacional. Igualmente, es necesario asegurarnos que el tratamiento de estos temas tan sensibles en los foros multilaterales competentes se realiza de una manera objetiva y no politizada. Quiero destacar en este sentido la firme vocación del Uruguay para fortalecer los mecanismos de protección de los derechos de mujeres, niñas, niños y adolescentes, adultos mayores, migrantes, personas con discapacidad y miembros del colectivo LGTBI. Las olas migratorias producto de guerras, conflictos internos o de crisis políticas y económicas de distintas escalas se han incrementado en los últimos años. Focos de inestabilidad regional, como el provocado por el conflicto en Ucrania, así como la guerra civil en Siria o los acontecimientos en Libia, Myanmar o en Venezuela, en nuestra propia región, han ocasionado un aumento de los flujos de personas y familias que abandonan sus hogares y sus países buscando seguridad y alivio. Quiero destacar el rol de la Corte Penal Internacional como mecanismo central del sistema de justicia internacional y su relevancia como factor disuasorio y sancionatorio contra los perpetradores de acciones genocidas, atrocidades en masa y de crímenes contra la humanidad. Señor Presidente, en el ámbito del mantenimiento de la paz y la seguridad internacional, y tal como lo hace anualmente, Uruguay renueva su apoyo a las misiones y operaciones de paz de las Naciones Unidas. Nuestro país tiene una larga trayectoria de contribución a estas misiones, iniciada a fines de la década de 1940, habiendo desplegado efectivos en diversas misiones durante más de 70 años en forma ininterrumpida. Uruguay se encuentra entre los primeros 15 contribuyentes de tropas al sistema de Naciones Unidas y actualmente nuestros despliegues principales se encuentran en la MONUSCO, en República Democrática del Congo y en UNDOF, en los Altos de Golán. Uruguay mantiene inalterable este compromiso con la paz, la seguridad internacional y la protección de civiles. En línea con el espíritu y los postulados de la resolución 13.025 del Consejo de Seguridad, el pasado 21 de julio, Uruguay presentó oficialmente su Plan de Acción Nacional sobre Mujer, Paz y Seguridad. Señor Presidente, Uruguay es uno de los países fundadores de esta organización, habiendo colaborado activamente en diversos periodos de su historia con su objetivo de preservar la paz y la seguridad internacional. Uruguay no consigue la paz en el mundo si no existen compromisos serios y firmes de parte de la comunidad internacional en materia de desarme y no proliferación. El bloqueo y la parálisis experimentada recientemente en el marco de la 10ª conferencia de examen del Tratado de no proliferación nuclear nos debe hacer reflexionar sobre este particular momento en la historia de la organización. El Uruguay ha apoyado y seguirá apoyando la agenda del desarme de las Naciones Unidas y continuará buscando los acuerdos que permitan que la arquitectura del desarme funcione de forma eficaz y confiable. Entre los factores de inseguridad presentes en la realidad internacional, es necesario recordar la creciente influencia de la delincuencia internacional organizada, el narcotráfico y el terrorismo internacional. Así como nuestro gobierno se ha trazado como una de sus prioridades el combate contra la delincuencia y el narcotráfico para brindarle a nuestra sociedad niveles más elevados de seguridad, reitero el firme compromiso y la cooperación del Uruguay en la lucha contra el crimen organizado y las actividades terroristas a nivel regional e internacional. El Uruguay está comprometido con la agenda de ciberseguridad y combate al ciberdelito, la organización de una responsabilidad primordial en esta materia, y Uruguay participa activamente en las instancias que están teniendo lugar. Adicionalmente, en este momento, el Uruguay ha formalizado su solicitud al Consejo de Europa para adherir al Consejo de Budapest, al Convenio de Budapest sobre ciberdelincuencia, y abrazar de esta manera la más moderna legislación existente a la fecha para enfrentar el ciberdelito. Como a todos nos consta, las tareas que desarrolla esta organización son numerosas, oportunas y necesarias. Pero, como acertadamente ha expresado el secretario general Antonio Guterres, debemos combatir las disfuncionalidades que nos paralizan. Como gobernantes, tenemos la obligación de lograr que nuestra organización represente a todos los ciudadanos, incluidos los sin voz y sin rostro, y no sea percibido como un escenario anual de retórica para delegados y diplomáticos. Señor Presidente, la democracia no es un modelo perfecto ni soluciona todos los problemas de los hombres y mujeres en este mundo. Pero es notoriamente el sistema de gobierno que mejor permite salvaguardar el mayor anhelo de los seres humanos, que es el de su libertad. La democracia es el régimen político que representa y refleja de una manera la propia condición humana. Nuestras expectativas de superación espiritual y material y el disfrute del derecho de poder elegir. Democracia y Estado de Derecho son elementos necesariamente interdependientes, esenciales para que el orden social y político de un país represente la voluntad genuina de sus ciudadanos. Sin embargo, la democracia, sus principios y sus valores son sistemáticamente acechados en múltiples lugares del mundo. Para el Uruguay, el sistema democrático forma parte de su historia y de sus mejores tradiciones. Constituye un rasgo de identidad de nuestra sociedad. Nos enorgullecemos de ser considerados como una democracia plena, pero también somos conscientes de nuestra responsabilidad como gobernantes de fortalecerla cada día y protegerla ante sus múltiples desafíos. Esta construcción democrática con sus valores y sus principios rectores, nuestra democracia y nuestro Estado de Derecho, lo que ha permitido es que la voz de Uruguay no solo sea escuchada, sino también respetada en la comunidad internacional. Estos fueron, son y seguirán siendo entonces los pilares fundamentales sobre los que reposa la contribución de mi país al concierto internacional. Sobre esta base, Uruguay renueva nuevamente su compromiso con el sistema internacional de naciones. Muchas gracias.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Uruguay. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mohammed Salem Ould Merzoug, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation in Mauritians abroad of Mauritania.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of God, the merciful, compassionate. May the blessings of Allah accompany the Prophet Muhammad. Mr. President, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to give this statement on behalf of His Excellency the President of the Republic, Mr. Mohammed Ould Ghazouani. I also wish to share with this august assembly his most sincere appreciations and his every wish for success. It is also a great pleasure for me to congratulate Mr. Khoroshi on his election to preside over the 77th session of the UN General Assembly, and we wish him every success in carrying out his mission leading this session, whose topic is transformative solutions to interlocking challenges. I also wish to commend His Excellency Mr. Sahed for the dexterity with which he led the work of the 76th session. We also wish to express our thanks and respect to Mr. Antonio Gutierrez for his diligent efforts aimed at promoting the United Nations and bolstering its role. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is being held in very difficult and complex international conditions. This includes the war in Ukraine and COVID-19, as well as terrorist threats of various natures, natural disasters, which are brought upon by climate change. Indeed, these crises confronted by the world today and the economic and social and humanitarian repercussions of these crises are unprecedented. This, therefore, represents a challenge to all sectors of life and to international food insecurity in particular. Therefore, it is very natural that in these difficult conditions weigh more heavily on developing countries due to their vulnerability and lack of resilience. The war in Ukraine has occurred at a time when the world is still emerging from the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. This war has led to gaps in the supply chains for both fuel and food, and the prices of both of these goods are increasing. Without significant efforts undertaken by the United Nations, Turkey, and all other partners who reached this important agreement on grain exports as well as fertilizer exports, then the world will have seen an even greater catastrophe. We are of the view that the measures undertaken in this area by the international community remain very minimal. And we call today for ramped-up efforts to find solutions that would guarantee peace, security, and dignity to all the peoples of the world. And these are the very goals for which the United Nations were created. From this rostrum, my country, the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, calls upon the international community to fulfill its responsibilities to developing countries, to poor countries, and to assist them as quickly as possible to address the challenges threatening their food security, as well as to counter the negative effects of this crisis. We reiterate our call to eliminate foreign debt for the countries of the African continent. Sir, these gaps are being seen, many gaps are growing throughout the world. We are seeing a fourth industrial revolution. We are seeing AI developing, while other parts of the world are dealing with poverty, are dealing with ignorance. This requires us to think in a collective manner, in solidarity, to find the appropriate solutions to respond to these challenges and to maintain the dignity of humans everywhere. Therefore, it is crucial, while reflecting on this paradox, here at the United Nations, under this topic of solidarity and science, this is an opportunity to examine and evaluate the success of the plans and the projects that we have adopted to overcome these challenges. Allow me here to present the efforts made by my country to establish the rule of law, good governance, social unity, and rehabilitation. My country, Mauritania, has made significant progress in re-establishing the values of justice, equity, democracy, individual and collective freedoms, the freedom of the press, and the adoption of dialogue and consultations to manage the government's affairs with participation by civil society in its development strategies. The separation of powers, impartiality in the justice system, accountability for the parliament. All of these elements aim at guaranteeing greater transparency in the management of the state's affairs. My country has also promoted efforts aimed at promoting and protecting human rights. This by combating the forms of modern slavery, of human trafficking. And illicit migration. When speaking of social cohesion, my government, under the leadership of the President, have established significant programs that will bolster national cohesion and that will support and assist the poorer groups in society. The goals here include creating schools, healthcare centers, providing drinkable water. This has helped 15% of the Mauritanian population. My country has also provided the necessary assistance to 85,000 refugees from our brother country Mali under the Ambara Agreement in the southwest of Mauritania, and this is in cooperation with UN entities. Regarding investment in human resources, we have prepared programs to train youth and to empower youth so that they will be positive elements when joining the labor market. We have also worked to promote women's participation in political life. In the same vein, my country has launched a reform program for the educational system based on a precise analysis of the gaps that exist. Experts and all stakeholders in society participated in this analysis. In healthcare, my country is ramping up its efforts to ensure health care for its citizens by expanding its services at all levels. While significant efforts have been carried out to promote the national economy and to and to make it stronger, more resilient, more resistant to various international shocks. My country, Mauritania, has always taken care to establish an interlocking approach to combating terrorism in all its forms, violent extremism, and in taking into account such areas as the economy, social issues, and security sector. We're working with regional and international partners to increase negotiations and coordination in implementing these plans, all while respecting human rights. We believe that the countries of the Sahel represent a key force to resist terrorism and to establish development throughout the region. Here, we call for support for this group of countries as we move and overcome those obstacles that they face today. Sir, we are committed to the environment and to sustainable development through clean and renewable energy. 40% of the energy consumed in Mauritania will be focused on renewable energy. We are working to increase this percentage of clean energy in our country. Mauritania is working to benefit from its enormous natural resources such as wind and solar power. Thus, we will support local industry and provide for the economic and social development of the country. Mr. President, we have also achieved significant results under our efforts to address desertification through agricultural reforms in those areas that have been affected by droughts. We're working to improve our use of water resources and to protect biological diversity. Here, we are very hopeful about the COP27, which is to be held in Egypt from the 6th to the 18th of November. And we hope that all states will respect their commitments there. My country, Mauritania, would like to reiterate its unwavering position as a defender of all just causes, and this is why here I wish to state the following. The right of the Palestinian people to sovereignty and dignity as an independent state with Al-Quds al-Shari as its capital in accordance with the peace initiatives and relevant resolutions. We wish to reiterate our condemnation of the continued violations by Israel of the rights of Palestinians and all other Arab-occupied territories. All efforts must be made to find a political solution that could maintain the unity and territorial integrity, as well as the dignity of its people and the independence of this country. Support must be given to the legitimate powers in our brother country, Yemen. Here we also call for a peaceful solution
دعوتها إلى إيجاد حل
When speaking
يصون
of Western
وحدة
Sahara,
وسيادة
our
دولة
position remains
ليبيا
the
الشقيقة
same.
ودعمها
We support the efforts of the United Nations and all relevant Security Council resolutions.
للجهود المبذولة للعودة إلى الوضع الدستوري في جمهورية مالي الشقيقة.
Efforts to return to a constitutional order in Mali.
في أوكرانيا ومطالبة الأطراف المعنية
We wish to express our concern about the continued war in Ukraine. We call on the parties involved to negotiate so as to end this war and to prevent additional catastrophes throughout the world. I thank you kindly.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation and Mauritanians abroad of Mauritania. I now give the floor to His Excellency Retno Lestari Priyansari Marsudi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Indonesia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, many leaders have spoken here over the past few days. We share the same concern. The current state of our world is very worrying. The pandemic persists and global economy remains sluggish. War among nations is no longer a possibility, but has become a reality. Violation of international law has become a norm in pursuit of narrow self-interest. Crisis after crisis is unfolding around the world. Climate change, rising inflation, food and energy shortages. Mr. President, history teaches us these phenomena might lead to a huge war. Let us look at the period leading up to Second World War, the Great Depression, rise of ultranationalism, competition over resources, and rivalry between major powers. These are very similar to what we are facing today. Clearly, we have been handling these challenges the wrong way. We have been divided instead of united. We have been working individually instead of collectively. We have been focusing on words instead of deeds. The question now, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to continue the same path? Or are we going to choose a different path? If we continue the same path, we would be heading toward a disaster. But if we choose a different path, we must stand a chance. So today, I would like to offer you a word based on a new paradigm. A paradigm of win-win, not zero-sum. A paradigm of engagement, not of containment. A paradigm of collaboration, not of competition. This is the transformative solution that we need. Mr. President, allow me to share you why we need this new paradigm. First, to reignite the spirit of peace. Trust deficit breeds hatred and fear and may lead into a conflict. We witness these phenomena in many parts of the world. We must turn trust deficit into strategic trust. And it starts with upholding respect for international law. The fundamental principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable. I repeat, the fundamental principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable. This principle must always be upheld. Meanwhile, peaceful solution is the only option to settle any conflicts. Habit of dialogue and cooperation would nurture strategic trust. These are the rules of the game that we must maintain if we truly want peace. It is our responsibility to apply them consistently, not selectively or only when we see fit. My president confided these messages of peace in his visit to Kyiv and Moscow last June. We must also apply this new paradigm to make a breakthrough in Palestine and Afghanistan. For far too long, the people in Palestine have suffered and long for peace. Until Palestine can truly become an independent state, Indonesia will stand firm in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. People in Afghanistan also deserve a peaceful and prosperous life, where rights of all peoples, including women, are equally respected, and where access to education for women and girls is granted. Without this new paradigm, peace would remain an elusive dream. Second, revive our responsibility for global recovery. We are concerned that global solidarity is fading away, whereas injustice and selfishness abound. The weak stand small and the mighty takes all. We are seeing the symptoms every day. Trade discrimination is running rampant. Monopoly in global supply chain persists. Global economic governance is used to justify the rules of the strong. The pandemic teaches us a valuable lesson that no one is safe until everyone is. This lesson shapes the priorities of Indonesia G20 presidency. The whole world is pinning their hope on G20 to be catalyst of global economic recovery, especially for developing countries. G20 must not fail. We cannot let global recovery fall at the mercy of geopolitics. We must act urgently to address food and energy crisis and prevent a fertilizer crisis from happening. Otherwise, billions more people will be at risk, particularly again in developing countries. We also need a new paradigm as we move beyond the recovery. A new paradigm will instill a collective responsibility to attain the 2030 agenda and fight climate change. Without this new paradigm, there would not be a strong recovery for all, and many of us would be left behind. Third, to bolster regional partnership. Mr. President, in many places, post-war regional architecture was built as a tool for containment and alienation. This phenomenon continues today with minilateral groupings. Many become part of a proxy war between major powers. This is not what regional architecture should be. It must serve as the building block for peace and stability rather than undermining them. ASEAN was built exactly for this purpose. We refuse to be a pawn in a new Cold War. Instead, we actively promote the paradigm of collaboration with all countries. This paradigm will also guide Indonesia's chairmanship in ASEAN next year. It is the commitment of Indonesia to forge ASEAN centrality in shaping regional order in the Indo-Pacific, to reinforce ASEAN unity as a locomotive for peace, stability, and prosperity in the region, and to ensure ASEAN matters for our peoples, for the region, and for the world. ASEAN will also continue to address seriously the situation in Myanmar. Indonesia is deeply concerned by the military junta's lack of commitment to implement the 5-point of consensus. ASEAN must move forward and not be taken hostage by the situation in Myanmar. The support of the international community, in particular the neighboring countries of Myanmar, is very important to bring back democracy in Myanmar. On Pacific, Indonesia will continue to strengthen our cooperation with the Pacific countries. We will work together to address our shared challenges, including on climate change. As a Pacific nation ourselves, we want to see the Pacific as an integral part of peaceful, stable, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Mr. President, the new paradigm of collaboration must be the spirit of the UN. Inclusive, meaningful engagement must trump above take it or leave it approach, whereas the voices of all countries, big and small, developed and developing, equally matter. This is the very foundation of multilateralism. That is why we need a strong and reformed UN. That is why we need a renewed multilateralism that is fit for purpose and that is fit for its time. That is why we need a multilateralism that delivers. I repeat, we need a multilateralism that delivers. I believe by working together and adopting a new paradigm, we can create a better world for all. It is no longer time to talk the talk. Now is the time to walk the talk. I thank you very much.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Indonesia. I now give the floor to His Excellency Ramtane Lamamra, Minister for Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad of Algeria.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God Almighty, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon the Prophet Muhammad. Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, it gives me great pleasure to extend to Mr. Sabah Qureshi my warmest congratulations on his assumption of the presidency of the General Assembly at its current session. I wish him every success in his work. I would like also to thank Mr. Abdullah Shahid for his excellent presidency of the 76th session. I would also like to reiterate to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, our full support for his efforts and endeavors aimed at improving the functioning of our organization and strengthening its role in accordance with the 3 pillars of the United Nations Charter, namely security, development, and human rights. Mr. President, this session is held as the world is witnessing increasing tensions that threaten to have serious repercussions on the system of international relations, especially in light of the resurgence of the phenomenon of polarization, as is the case in the Ukraine crisis and its negative repercussions, which would double the existential challenges in vital areas. This situation, with its complexities and dilemmas, which are difficult to see in all their aspects in the present circumstance. This situation highlights more than ever the structural imbalances that characterize global governance mechanisms and the urgent need to address them in an approach that ensures parity and equality among all states and puts an end to the long-standing marginalization of developing states.
من هذا المنطلق فإن التحولات العميقة التي نشهدها اليوم وبالرغم مما يترتب عنها من صعوبات فإنها تمنحنا في نفس الوقت فرصا للتقييم المسار والعمل على إعلاء المبادئ والأهداف التي قامت عليها منظمتنا. وبالتالي فإننا نتفق تماماً مع شعار الدورة الحالية ونؤمن أننا بالفعل أمام منعطف حاسم لتفعيل العمل متعدد الأطراف في مواجهة التحديات المشتركة التي تثبت يوماً بعد يوم أن أمننا الجماعي مرتبط ارتباطاً وثيقاً باستقرار وازدهار كافة شعوبنا دون استثناء. السيد الرئيس، إن بلادي التي تحتفل هذا العام بذكرى 60 لاسترجاع استقلالها الوطني وهي تواصل بكل عزم مسيرة بناء الجزائر الجديدة تحت قيادة الرئيس عبد المجيد تبون، تؤكد تمسكها بهذه القيم والمبادئ وعزمها على تقديم مساهماتها في الحفاظ على السلم والأمن الدوليين وتحقيق تنمية شاملة وعادلة ومستدامة. وعملا بهذه الروح تستعد الجزائر لاحتضان قمة هامة للدول العربية يومي الفاتح والثاني من نوفمبر المقبل، وهي تتطلع لأن يشكل هذا الاستحقاق محطة فارقة في مسيرة العمل العربي المشترك نحو مساهمة أكثر فعالية للمجموعة العربية في معالجة التحديات الراهنة على الساحتين الإقليمية والدولية. في هذا السياق وتحضيرا لهذا الموعد الهام تواصل الجزائر مساعيها الرامية لتعزيز الوحدة الوطنية بين الأشقاء الفلسطينيين على ضوء المبادرة التي أطلقها رئيس الجمهورية السيد عبد المجيد تبون تماشيا مع الجهود التي تبذلها العديد من الدول العربية الشقيقة في هذا الصدد. ومن هذا المنبر أجدد التأكيد على أن معالجة القضية الفلسطينية تبقى المفتاح الرئيسي لاستعادة الأمن والاستقرار في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، وذلك من خلال تكريس حق الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق في إقامة دولته المستقلة على حدود 4 من أجوان 1967 وعاصمتها القدس، مع إنهاء احتلال الجولان السوري طبقا لقرارات الأمم المتحدة ذات الصلة ولمبادرة السلام العربية. وفي هذا الصدد تؤكد الجزائر دعمها للطلب الذي تقدمت به دولة فلسطين للنيل العضوية الكاملة بالأمم المتحدة، ونتطلع إلى استقبال دولة فلسطين قريبا بصفتها الدولة العضو 194. وبنفس العزيمة تؤكد الجزائر مجددا دعمها لحق شعب الصحراء الغربية الشقيق في إنهاء احتلال أراضيه وفي ممارسة حقه غير القابل للتصرف أو التقادم في تقرير المصير والاستقلال، وتدعو منظمة الأمم المتحدة لمضاعفة جهودها عبر المبعوث الشخصي للأمين العام
General's personal envoy for Western Sahara, Mr. Stefan de Mistura, with a view to enabling the parties to the conflict, namely the two states members of the African Union, the Kingdom of Morocco and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, to enable those two states to resume direct negotiations with a view to reaching a mutually acceptable political solution within the framework of international legitimacy. Mr. President, based on its principal positions and its adherence to the principles of non-alignment, as well as its history and its rich experience in international mediation, Algeria stresses the need to overcome the logic of crisis management by the international community in order to focus more instead on the search for solutions.
فسواء تعلق الأمر بالتهديدات العابرة
أو
بالنزاعات المحلية ترى الجزائر أن كسر الحلقة المفرغة لهذه الأزمات لن يتم بصفة مستدامة إلا عبر معالجة أسبابها الجذرية. في هذا الإطار وبحكم توليها ريادة الوساطة الدولية ورئاسة لجنة متابعة تنفيذ اتفاق السلم والمصالحة في جمهورية مالي المنبثق عن مسار الجزائر تدعو بلادي المجموعة الدولية لمساندة الأطراف المالية بهدف تسريع وتيرة تجسيد كافة التزاماتها في ظل المرحلة الانتقالية الدقيقة التي يمر بها هذا البلد الشقيق. وفي الجارة ليبيا نؤكد مرة أخرى على حتمية معالجة جوهر الأزمة عبر إنهاء التدخلات الخارجية بمختلف أشكالها في شؤون هذا البلد الشقيق ومرافقة الأطراف الليبية نحو صياغة التوافقات الضرورية للمضي قدما في تحقيق أهداف المصالحة الوطنية وتنظيم انتخابات حرة نزيهة تستجيب لتطلعات الشعب الليبي الشقيق في بناء دولته الديمقراطية والعصرية. وعلى الصعيد الإقليمي لا تزال منطقة الساحل والصحراء تشهد أوضاعا هشة من جراء التحديات التي يفرضها انتشار التهديدات الإرهابية والجرائم العابرة للحدود على خلفية تمدد ظاهرة انعدام الاستقرار المؤسساتي وتفاقم المشاكل التنموية إلى جانب التغييرات المناخية. أمام هذه الأوضاع المتأزمة وبحكم مسؤولياتها بصفتها منسق الاتحاد الأفريقي لجهود مكافحة الإرهاب والتطرف العنيف وكذا بحكم سياستها المبنية على حسن الجوار والتضامن تعتزم الجزائر تكثيف جهودها بالتنسيق مع الدول المعنية لإضفاء ديناميكية جديدة على آليات العمل المشترك في الجوار الإقليمي لضمان استجابات مشتركة وفعالة تكون في مستوى التحديات التي تفرضها أو يفرضها خطر الإرهاب على شعوب المنطقة جمعاء. كما تعمل الجزائر بمعية أشقائها من دول الجوار على تشجيع عوامل التكامل الاقتصادي والتنمية المستدامة ضمن فضاء يحقق الرخاء المشترك ويسمح ببلوغ أهداف التنمية المستدامة وتعزيز دعائم السلم والأمن في المنطقة. في هذا السياق أود أن أؤكد أن الجزائر الفخورة بانتمائها الإفريقي تظل طرفاً فاعلاً في مشروع التكامل وازدهار القارة وامتلاكها مقومات استقلالها السياسي والاقتصادي عبر التخلص من تبعات التدخلات الخارجية وعبر التوجه نحو بلورة حلول إفريقية للمشاكل الإفريقية. لهذا ندعو المجتمع الدولي إلى مرافقة الديناميكية الإيجابية التي تعرفها القارة الإفريقية من خلال الوفاء بالتزاماته ودعم أجندة 2063 للتنمية التي تعبر عن الرؤية المشتركة لمستقبل القارة مع تشجيع إقامة شراكات متوازنة تحترم القرارات السيادية التي تتخذها دول القارة الإفريقية في إطار الاتحاد الإفريقي. كما نؤمن إيمانا راسخا أن التطورات الأخيرة أثبتت بما لا يدع مجالا للشك أن قارتنا الإفريقية مهد الإنسانية والبعيدة كل البعد عن الصورة النمطية المروج عنها قادرة على تقديم نموذج جديد للحضارة الإنسانية، نموذج يضع الإنسان وبيئته في صلب اهتماماته وينير سبل إقامة علاقات ودية بين الدول على أسس العدل والمساواة. سيد الرئيس، في خضم هذه التطورات وإدراكاً منها لحجم التحديات غير المسبوقة المطروحة دولياً وإقليمياً، قدمت الجزائر ترشيحها لعضوية غير الدائمة في مجلس الأمن للفترة 2024-2025، وهو الترشيح الذي حظي بتزكية كل من الاتحاد الإفريقي وجامعة الدول العربية ومنظمة التعاون الإسلامي. إن الجزائر التي تتطلع لدعم الدول الأعضاء خلال الانتخابات المقرر إجراؤها في شهر جوان من العام القادم تلتزم بأنها ستبقى وفية لمبادئ وأهداف ميثاق الأمم المتحدة وستضم جهودها مع بقية الأعضاء في المجلس لإضفاء فعالية أكبر على الجهود الأممية الرامية لمنع نشوب النزاعات وحلها عبر السبل السلمية ودعم دور المنظمات الإقليمية الفاعلة مع تشجيع مشاركة بارزة للمرأة وفئة الشباب في تسوية الأزمات وضمان الحماية اللازمة لجميع الفئات الحشة. سيد الرئيس، لا شك أن المجموعة الدولية تقف اليوم أمام منعطف حاسم وهي مطالبة باتخاذ قرارات جريئة للحفاظ على أمنها الجماعي واستشراف آفاق مستقبل واعد للبشرية جمعاء. من هذا المنطلق تدعو الجزائر إلى ضرورة تفادي أخطاء الماضي ومن جر عنها من تبعات، وتنادي بضم جهودنا جميعا لإنجاح مسار الإصلاح وصولا إلى قيام منظومة عالمية يسودها الإنصاف والمساواة في السيادة والمصالح المتبادلة والتعاون البناء. نحن بحاجة أكثر من أي وقت مضى إلى العمل الجماعي والاستنارة بمبدأ وحدة المصير لتفادي انزلاقات خطيرة تهدد بعودة أحلك فصول تاريخ البشرية المعاصر. شكرا على كرم الإصغاء. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad of Algeria. I now give the floor to His Excellency Denise Ronaldo Moncada Colindres, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Nicaragua.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President,
señor Secretario General,
Distinguished Secretary General,
venimos a esta 77 Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas en momentos de extrema vulnerabilidad y peligro que han puesto y siguen poniendo en riesgo la vida en todos sus aspectos, en este mundo donde deberíamos unirnos para seguir enfrentando los grandes desafíos sociales, económicos, climáticos, culturales, de seguridad que exponen cotidianamente a la familia humana. Venimos y hablamos a nombre de un pueblo heroico, digno, soberano, libre, que, hermanado con tantos pueblos heroicos, dignos, soberanos y libres del planeta, hemos venido mostrando y ejerciendo nuestra dignidad y soberanía nacional, enfrentando a lo largo de los siglos a la avaricia y la codicia colonial e imperial que desde Europa y el norte de este continente herido se ha ensañado, agrediendo, interviniendo, invadiendo, ocupando nuestras tierras sagradas. De Nicaragua, los invasores han salido expulsados y derrotados por la bravura del patriotismo nicaragüense. Nuestro coraje propio ha sido también inspirado por las grandes luchas libertarias, revolucionarias y evolucionarias de admirables pueblos de este mundo. En estos tiempos de descaradas y violentas prácticas codiciosas, ambiciosas, avariciosas, en la absurda pretensión política y sus consabidas petulancias y farsas comunicacionales de apoderarse de nuestras libertades, patrimonios naturales y culturales e imponer cuestión que no lograrán una sociedad global gobernada y administrada por quienes han cometido y exhibido con horrorosa y pasmosa frescura su criminalidad y los saqueos más grandes de las riquezas de nuestra casa común. El asalto, el atraco, la innoble y abominable depredación, el atoxino y los genocidios desatados por el colonialismo imperialista de la tierra son los verdaderos crímenes y ellos los verdaderos criminales de lesa humanidad. Así lo denunciamos. Al comparecer en este último día de sesiones en esta 77 Asamblea General, lo hacemos con la frente en alto y el pecho crecido de alientos libertarios, fraternales, solidarios, de justicia y paz duradera, de soberanía e independencia que deben respetarse y de carácter, mucho carácter, mucho temple, mucho corazón para defender lo nuestro. Hablamos el lenguaje de una comunidad humana que exige reconocimiento a nuestras particularidades, modelos y maneras de vivir, nuestros credos y credenciales, creencias, acordes con nuestra propia historia, tradición y esperanza que debemos hacer victoriosas porque la vida está hecha de empeños, afanes y búsquedas y exigencias de respeto de cada uno a todas y de todas a cada uno. Es hora de acercar el derecho de los pueblos a una organización de Naciones Unidas que nos represente a todas y todos y que no se someta a los designios de ninguna potencia imperialista. Es hora de hacer valer el mundo de diálogo y paz, de justicia y solidaridad, de hermandad y buena voluntad genuinas, verdaderas, encontrándonos desde nuestras diferencias y enriqueciendo nuestros consensos. Es hora de hacer valer nuestras múltiples voces, nuestros reclamos, nuestras causas, que no pueden seguir siendo ignoradas o sepultados bajo cúmulos y montañas de egolatría e indiferencia. Es hora de trascender el egoísmo que asesina, que mata a millones de seres humanos en el mundo, sometidos a la crueldad de la pobreza y a la pobreza extrema, por los bárbaros instintos de las fieras, las potencias que buscan continuar y hasta perpetuar su dominio a expensas del hambre, la insalubridad, la destrucción climática, la ignorancia, la guerra y todas las oscuranas derivadas del odio. Es hora de seguir rechazando los bloqueos criminales, las agresiones llamadas sanciones ilegales, arbitrarias, ilícitas, que ponen en mayor evidencia la perversión de un sistema y un modelo imperialista y capitalista que sigue y pretende continuar castigando y desangrando al mundo a vista y difícil paciencia de los organismos que deberían defenderlo. Es hora de decir basta a la falta de sentido común, de compasión, de espiritualidad, al pavoroso y absoluto menosprecio de la condición y el alma humano. Es hora de decir basta ya, de reclamar, de rebelarnos y seguirnos rebelando contra la innata maldad del capitalismo que ahoga a las mayorías y enriquece brutalmente a unos cuantos. Basta ya. Es hora de decir basta al imperialismo hipócrita que politiza, falsifica y denigra los derechos humanos que todos los días ellos mismos violentan y niegan. El imperialismo y sus acciones coercitivas antividas en todas las esferas que por sí y para sí son contrarios al derecho internacional. Es hora de frenar con el concurso de todas y todos las invasiones, agresiones, ocupaciones de tantos territorios que están hechos para la gloria de Dios en términos del derecho a la vida segura, armoniosa, con derechos, con trabajo digno, alimentos y medios sostenibles y sustentables para hacer valer el bienestar y la alegría que merecemos. Es hora de denunciar y acabar con los pecados capitales que fundamentan la intervención e injerencia en los asuntos internos y propios de cada país. Y es hora de hacer valer la libertad de ser nosotros y no los otros que quieren, que insisten, que guerrean para desplazarnos y seguirnos ocupando y saqueando nuestras riquezas culturales y naturales. Es hora de hacer valer el principio de igualdad soberana de los Estados en todos los organismos y foros internacionales a fin de que ese mundo multipolar y no alineado que tanto hemos buscado sea realidad, se fortalezca, crezca y nos incluya a todas y todos. Es hora de asegurar que las cartas de Naciones Unidas y tantos organismos que deberían reunirnos sean válidas para todas y todos y respeten los derechos de todas y todos. Es y debe ser la hora de los pueblos. Los países que hemos vivido bajo todos los fuegos de la codicia, la avaricia, el egoísmo, la vanidad de vanidades, y la persecución del dominio absoluto sobre un mundo que no les pertenece, debemos fortalecer y consolidar nuestras identidades y consensos, defendiendo unidades, unidos, la cultura,
culture,
la justicia,
justice,
que es respeto y
based
paz
on
en
respect
todos
and
los
peace
espacios correspondientes.
in all the relevant spaces.
Nuestro abrazo solidario y comprometido
Our
con la digna y
solidarity
brava Venezuela,
and
con la
committed
heroica
embrace
Cuba,
with the
con las
dignified and
históricas y
brave
nobles batallas
Venezuela,
del
with
pueblo
heroic
palestino,
Cuba, with the
la
historic and
revolución
noble battles
islámica de
of
las
the
familias
Palestinian
iraníes,
people, with the
la
Islamic
continua y
revolution
gran
of the
batalla
Iranian
de la
families,
Federación de
the
Rusia
continuing great
contra
battle
el
of the Russian
fascismo
Federation
y por
against
seguridad,
fascism, for
integridad
security,
y paz,
integrity, and
que
peace,
seguirá,
which will
no lo
continue.
dudamos,
We have no
cosechando
doubt
victorias.
to gather victories.
Nuestro abrazo solidario
Our embrace
a la
of
admirable
solidarity
resistencia
to
y
the
desarrollo
admirable
justo de la
resistance
República Popular China,
and just
que
development
genera
of the
tanta
People's
incomodidad,
Republic of China, which
inquietud
generates so much
y envidia
discomfort,
a los
concern,
enemigos
and
del
envy
bien común.
among the enemies of the common good.
Es hora de seguir
It is
unidos
time
con Siria,
to remain
la
united with
República
Syria,
Árabe Saudí
with the
Democrática,
Saudi
Bielorrusia,
Arab
los pueblos
Democratic
del Asia,
Republic, with
África y
Belarus,
nuestra
with the
América
peoples of
caribeña,
Asia, of Africa,
librando
and of our
todas las
America and the
magníficas,
Caribbean,
colosales
fighting
batallas
all
que
the
estamos seguros
magnificent, momentous
resultarán en el más
struggles that
sublime
we
y
are sure
supremo
will
triunfo
result
de
in the
todos los
most
tiempos.
sublime and
Otro
supreme
mundo
triumph of
que
all
es
time.
ya
Another world that is now
indispensable e
indispensable
impostergable.
and cannot be postponed.
En Nicaragua, hermanas y hermanos,
Sisters and
hay
brothers,
patria.
in
Y
Nicaragua,
porque hay patria,
there is
hay
a
paz.
patriotic nation, and because there is a
En
patriotic
nombre
nation, there is
de
peace.
nuestros generales de hombres y
In the
mujeres
name of our
libres,
generals of free men
Augusto
and
Sandino y
women,
Benjamín Celedón,
Augusto Sandino
héroes
and Benjamin
nacionales
Zeledón,
y héroes
national
del
heroes
antiimperialismo
and heroes
que
of
llenan nuestros
anti-imperialism who
corazones
fill our
de
hearts
fuerza
with
para
the
luchar
resolution to
y seguir
fight
venciendo.
and continue
En nombre de nuestro
overcoming.
infinito Padre de
In the name
metáforas,
of our
sueños
infinite
y
Father of
realidades
metaphor, of
mundanas y
dreams and
celestiales,
realities,
nuestro maestro
both worldly
mágico,
and
el
heavenly,
gran Rubén
our
Darío,
magical teacher, the
nos
great
saludamos
Rubén Darío,
y convocamos
we
todas y
greet
todos
each and every
a
one of
seguir
you
luchando
and call on
por la
all of us
justicia,
to
la
continue
paz
fighting for
y los
justice,
derechos
peace,
irrenunciables de nuestros
and the
pueblos
inalienable rights
en
of our
vida,
peoples
salud,
to life,
fuerza,
to health,
esperanza
to strength,
y fe de
to hope
porvenir.
and faith for the
Un mundo
future.
mejor,
A better
multipolar,
world, multipolar,
justo,
just,
ético,
ethical,
espiritual y
spiritually
materialmente
and
se está
materially
generando ya.
is already
Y
being brought
aquí
about.
estamos
And we
para
are
seguirlo
here
creando
to
y
continue
para
to create
defenderlo.
it and to defend it.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President,
estimadas amigas, amigos,
distinguished friends,
la soberanía de un pueblo
the sovereignty of
no
a
se
people
discute,
is not a
se
matter for
defiende
discussion,
con
but
amor
one to be
y
defended
sagradas
with love
llamaradas
and the
de
sacred
celestes
flames of
esperanzas.
celestial hopes.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Nicaragua. I now give the floor to His Excellency Othman Gerandi, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Migration and Tunisians abroad of Tunisia.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد كسب كروسي رئيس الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة، السيد أنطونيو غوتيريس الأمين العام لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرات السيدات والسادة، أود في البداية أن أهنئكم السيد الرئيس ومن خلالكم جمهورية المجر الصديقة على رئاسة الدورة 77 للأمم المتحدة، وأعرب لكم عن دعم تونس لما أعلنتم عنه من توجهات باعتبار أن التضامن والاستدامة والعلوم هي فعلا مقومات أساسية للحلول التي نتطلع إليها. فائق التقدير أيضا للسيد عبد الله شهيد على حسن إدارته لأشغال الدورة السابقة للجمعية العامة في ظل
capable leadership during the previous session of the General Assembly marked with significant challenges whose consequences envisage even greater difficulties. I also wish to thank Mr. Antonio Guterres for the efforts he has carried out to promote the role of our organization and creating an effective response to these challenges, in particular through the establishment of our common agenda. This agenda is a ray of hope for the international community. And this at a time when we began to think about whether it would even be possible to overcome the consequences of the pandemic, the health care, and economic and humanitarian consequences. This agenda, like other UN frameworks that we have supported, and like the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, or the Sustainable Development Agenda for 2030, they are based on equality, solidarity, and on leaving no one behind. Nevertheless, Mr. President, it is regrettable that there are peoples today who are threatened with being left behind because of this disbalance in the international economic system and a lack of international solidarity. There are challenges that are being exacerbated today, whether they be natural disasters, crises, or issues linked to climate change or irregular migration, or the increase in the number of refugees, or issues linked to famine, malnutrition, and food insecurity, which threaten millions of people. While we are overcoming the challenges linked to the pandemic, these issues that will be felt for many years to come, the Russo-Ukrainian crisis has exacerbated these issues. Indeed, the world is facing an acute energy and food crisis due to perturbations in the supply chains of the world. There's an unprecedented increase in the price of foods. There's a decrease in purchase power, and there are significant increases in interest rates and in inflation. This is a critical point in our common destiny, in our history. This is a time that requires us to find transformative, radical solutions that will allow our peoples to overcome the current circumstances and to strengthen both durability and resilience. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen,
إلى هذه الدورة وتتساءل عما إذا كنا قادرين فعلا كمجموعة دولية على تنفيذ الحلول التحويلية وعما إذا كانت لدينا الإرادة السياسية لمعالجة الأزمات العالمية التي ما فتئت تتفاقم وتتراكم. ففي كل دورة تنضاف قضايا جديدة لأخرى سابقة. فهل كنا نؤجل حلول اليوم لتصبح مشاكل الغد؟ وهل إننا فعلا متحملون لمسؤولياتنا إزاء مستقبل الأجيال القادمة؟
Are we able to address the issues and solve these problems for the generations to come? We must find these solutions. This is only possible if we lay aside traditional policies and solutions. My delegation reiterates that
فقد برهنت هذه المعالجات على مدى عشرات السنين عدم القدرة على تقديم الحلول الجذرية والناجعة لمختلف الأزمات والحاجة إلى سياسات جديدة على التضامن والعدالة وهو المسنا في مقترحات تقرير الأمين العام برنامجنا المشترك. لقد أملت علينا تداعيات جائحة كوفيد-19 وتبعات الوضع في
The
أوكرانيا
consequences of
ضرورة
the
مراجعة
COVID-19
هذه المقاربات
pandemic and the
حتى
crisis in
نتمكن من
Ukraine
إنقاذ
has
أهداف
forced
التنمية
us to
المستدامة
re-examine our
2030
approaches.
قبل فوات
We
الأوان.
must save
كما أشار إلى
the
ذلك
SDGs before it's too
الأمين العام. واسمحوا لي في هذا الإطار
This is
أن
also
أؤكد
an
على
issue
ما يلي.
raised by the
أولاً،
Secretary General.
لا
I
يمكن
wish to reiterate the following points.
صياغة هذه الحلول خارج إطار العمل متعدد الأطراف
Firstly, these
والتضامن الإنساني
solutions can only be
وبالتعاون
developed
والتنسيق
through
مع
multilateral
منظمة الأمم
action
المتحدة
and in
مع
the
الحفاظ على
spirit of
بقية
solidarity in
الأطر
coordination with the
والآليات
United Nations
باعتبارها
while
رافدا لهذا
preserving
التعاون
the other frameworks and
تعاضده
mechanisms as
وتتكامل
vectors
معه
for this
ولا
coordination.
تنافسه
These
وتضعف من
frameworks and
قدرته
mechanisms
على تقديم الحلول.
complement and complete
وهذا ما أكدنا
this
عليه مؤخرا في
coordination
تونس
without competing with it
بمناسبة
or
احتضان
weakening it.
بلادنا
This is what my country
يومي
has
27 و
noted
28
while
أوت
welcoming on the 27th
للدورة
and 28th of August this year
لندوة طوكيو الدولية للتنمية في
while
أفريقيا
hosting the 8th session of the Tokyo Conference
لطرح عديد
on the
القضايا
development of
الموجودة اليوم
Africa,
على
TCAD
جدول
8.
أعمالنا في
Here
علاقة
we were able to
بكيفية
discuss many of the
تحقيق التنمية
items inscribed in our
المستدامة
agenda,
وفق
including
مقاربات
achieving
تتكامل فيها
sustainable
الأبعاد
development
الاقتصادية
through approaches that take into
والإنسانية.
account the
ثانياً،
economy,
ضرورة
security issues,
تبني
and
نهج
humanitarian
اقتصادي
issues.
تتفوق في
Secondly,
جودة النمو
there must be an
الاقتصادي على
economic model
سرعته،
developed
خاصة من خلال التركيز أكثر على الاستثمار في المعرفة
focuses on
والعلوم
quality and
والابتكار
not on
والتكنولوجيا
speed
الحديثة.
of economic
وإننا
growth,
نتطلع
in
في تونس
particular
إلى قمة
through investment in modern
التي
technology and
ستحتضنها
science.
جزيرة جربة يومي 19 و20 نوفمبر
In the island of Djerba in November, Tunisia will host a summit of the Francophonie on digital issues as vectors for diversity and innovation. This summit should allow us to achieve our common goals in digital aspects as well as in development.
إدارة مسألة الديون وفق مقاربات تنموية جديدة وفي كيفية الدعم المالي الذي يوفره النظام المالي العالمي بعيدا عن الشروط المشرفة أو الإملاءات التي لا تأخذ بعين الاعتبار خصوصيات الدول وأوضاعها خاصة في البلدان النامية والأقل نمواً ولا سيما في المنطقة الأفريقية حيث لم تجدد النظام العالمي المالي العالمي الدعم المرجو لمعاضدة جهودها في مواجهة التحديات القائمة وسعياً للتعافي وتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة.
Promote growth and achieve the sustainable development goals, something that the Secretary General has confirmed by describing an international financial system that has disappointed developing countries. My country is restructuring its debt and creating projects that would generate wealth.
إلى الخارج. رابعاً يتعين اليوم على المجموعة الدولية أن تجدد التزامها نحو القارة الإفريقية على أساس التضامن والمساواة والشراكة المتكافئة والاستماع إلى مشاغلها التنموية خامساً لا يمكن معالجة التحديات التي يواجهها العالم اليوم دون توطيد مقاومات الأمن والسلم الدوليين القائمين على سيادة القانون الدولي والشرعية الدولية وفي هذا السياق لا بد من العمل على تسوية الصراعات سلمياً دون انتقائية ووضع حداً للنزاعات العبثية والامتناع عن افتعال الأزمات واختلاقها وإيجاد الحلول للقضايا العاجلة وفي مقدمتها القضية الفلسطينية من خلال إنهاء الاحتلال وإقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها. سادساً علينا أن لكل دولة بدون استثناء تحدياتها ومشاكلها وخصوصياتها ولا يوجد منوال أو نموذج واحد ملائم للجميع. فلنتفق أن هناك مبادئ وقيم وقواسم مشتركة تجمعنا ونحن ملزمون جميعا باحترامها وتبقى تفاصيل الخيارات والتوجهات من الاختصاصات السيادية للدول فلا توجد ديمقراطية بل توجد ديمقراطيات وتمثل الديمقراطية في تونس خياراً وطنياً
for Tunisia is a national choice, one that it will not deviate from. We are working to bolster democracy and preserve it through a reform process which will be completed through the parliamentary elections which will be held on the 17th of December 2022. This is the will of the people of Tunisia, which are committed to ensuring the preservation of its freedoms, its security, its constitutional rights, the rule of law, and the sovereignty of its people. In different regional and international bodies, Tunisia has reiterated its commitment to human rights, to its promotion and protection, and has contributed through many initiatives to the UN system and is always on the side of our universal common principles. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, current challenges require us to show true common will to overcome this stage of analysis and to move on to actions. We must be able to bolster multilateralism. Our peoples do no longer want to hear empty promises. We must be able to restore trust in our national and international institutions so as to move forward on our common goals and to build a better world for us, but also for generations to come, a world of security, a world of humanity, prosperity, and sustainability. I thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Migration and Tunisians abroad of Tunisia. I now give the floor to His Excellency Thandi Dorji, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bhutan.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Kuzambola. I bring you the warm greetings of His Majesty the King and from the people of Bhutan. Allow me to convey our congratulations to His Excellency Mr. Chaba Korosi, the President of the 77th UNGA. Please rest assured, Mr. President, of Bhutan's full support as you steer us through the session. I also take the opportunity to convey our gratitude and admiration for His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th General Assembly, for the exceptional manner in which he guided our work this tumultuous year. Our appreciation is also due to the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, who in a most challenging year for our organization, coinciding with the first year of his second term, has continued to serve as a compelling and valiant advocate for peace, people, and the planet. Mr. President, I arrived in New York last week with a vastly different prepared text for delivery today. In recent days, however, I received a heartful appeal from Chimi, a bright 7-year-old girl in class 2 at Lunana Primary School in Bhutan, which has compelled me to rethink my statement. Lunana is a place in one of our northernmost districts, remote and perched at an altitude of 3,400 meters. It is home to a community of 810 people, comprising 885 households of highland nomadic herders spread across 13 scattered villages. Today, Lunana is embraced in the astounding beauty of rugged snow-capped peaks of the mighty Himalayas, which Lunaps, or the people of Lunana, both revere and depend upon for their livelihood and sustenance. Each time that Chimi and members of our community glance at these majestic peaks, the foremost question on their mind is, how long before these become barren and brown? I would like to share young Chimi's letter with you today. It reads, "My village is in great danger because of global warming. The glaciers and snow on our mountains are melting. The glacial lakes above our village are getting bigger every day. I'm sure it may cause a big flood in our village at any time, and we have to be in constant fear every day and night. Our innocent people are suffering because of others' evil actions. In near future, we may not see glaciers and snow on the mountains, beautiful glacial lakes and lunaps in this place. Therefore, I would request Your Excellency to kindly convey this small message to the world leaders and big and rich nations to help and save our tiny village from global warming. I'm sure if we all come together, we can not only save our tiny village, but also make our earth safe for all living beings. I think we are not late to fight against global warming now. Chimi's poignant letter evokes the plain truths of communities standing on the front lines of the climate crisis. But this is not limited to Bhutan. We are reminded with far too much frequency that across the world today, lives and livelihoods are in peril due to the impacts of human-induced climate change, rising sea levels, and natural disasters. The negative impacts of climate change are disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable and marginalized communities around the world, and doing so at a faster pace. The future of our youth and successive generations are under immediate threat. And the great irony is that it is through no fault of their own. But it is not too late. There is still time to undertake course correction. But that window of opportunity is fast closing. This calls for demonstration of greater ambition from developed and larger emitters consistent with the Paris Agreement. We must see deeper emission reductions in keeping with a fair share of global efforts consistent with a 1.5-degree pathway. At the same time, we must see greater solidarity and cooperation from all states to support efforts of the most vulnerable to adapt to the changing climate and deal with its consequences. We must ensure adequate and predictable finance, technological and capacity support for developing countries, particularly the LLDCs, the LDCs, and the SIDs, to enable us to achieve the goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement. We need to forge strong international cooperation in coming up with viable projects and partnerships to scale up investments in alternative renewable energy to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel, particularly in the manufacturing and transport sectors. Bhutan hopes that the urgency to move beyond business as usual will be heeded at COP27 this November. Mr. President, in Bhutan, our visionary monarchs have long recognized the importance of conserving our natural environment and living in harmony with nature. Although small, we have made bold commitments to safeguard nature and protect our environment, most significant of which is the constitutional requirement of maintaining 60% of our total area under forest cover, whereas in reality, nearly more than 70% of our territory is forested. Our forests are net carbon sinks, absorbing 2/3 more carbon than we emit. Bhutan is not just carbon neutral, we are carbon negative. In a world heading towards a water, food, and energy crisis, investing in sustainable mountain development should be a global priority. We need to build resilience of our communities, offer mountain communities practical and sustainable alternatives to enable them to continue living in harmony with nature and their surroundings. We must continue to foster sustainable mountain development with special emphasis on mountain agriculture, sustainable mountain tourism, and opportunities to tap renewable energy that the mountains provide. The adoption last year proclaiming 2022 as the International Year of Sustainable Mountain Development brought the spotlight on sustainable mountain development, its conservation and sustainable use as integral means of protecting the common heritage of our planet. To put focus and raise awareness, we are organizing an annual ultra-marathon event known as the Snowman Race that will take elite athletes from around the world to run across our Himalayas at elevations of 5,000 meters above sea level. We hope that this will generate more action and enhance greater partnership. Mr. President, we are at a watershed moment in history. The world today faces an unprecedented series of interlinked and cascading crises. The human race continues on a collision course with nature, battling with the climate, biodiversity, and pollution. At the same time, the pandemic that surfaced in March 2020 is still with us, and rather than abate, continues to morph and reinvent itself into new and more virulent strains. Outbreaks of other viral infections continue to occur at alarmingly frequent intervals, threatening the world with another possible pandemic. It is certain that these biological threats will continue and that we need to be better prepared. As with many other parts of the world, Bhutan was not spared the impacts of COVID-19 nor its induced disruptions. We are fortunate that with our beloved monarch leading from the front, with government policies and measures firmly grounded in science, and most importantly of all, with the full solidarity and confidence of our people behind us, Bhutan was fortunate to fare better than many others. As a result of stringent measures, determination and grit, we were able to minimize the immediate public health impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, emerging with minimal loss of life. Our campaign to vaccinate our population has been recognized as an unlikely success story. And today, more than 90% of our entire population stand fully vaccinated with 3 doses. This, in no small measure, was possible due to the heartwarming goodwill of friends and partners, including India, whose Vaccine Maitri initiative enabled the full first round of vaccination for our adult population. We are also grateful to the United States, Denmark, Bulgaria, Croatia, and China, whose generosity with vaccines came at a most critical time. We also thank all the other bilateral partners and multilateral agencies that supported logistics and provided financial support, medicines, and equipment for our responses to the pandemic. Our success would not have been possible without all of your support, and we remain ever grateful. Just when we are embarking on rebuilding and recovering from the pandemic and its associated impacts, conflict, supply disruptions, surge in food, energy, and fertilizer crises are driving millions more into extreme poverty, magnifying hunger and malnutrition. Predictably, it is the poorest and most vulnerable amongst us that suffer the brunt. The Secretary General rightly described this as either a breakdown or breakthrough moment for humanity and for the planet. Transformation is what we called for in the political declaration of the UN's 75th anniversary. We thank the Secretary General for his groundbreaking report on our common agenda responding to this call. Bhutan has followed closely the discussions around the report and its recommendations, and we are pleased with the momentum that has been generated. As we continue our deliberations, Bhutan will engage constructively, including in preparations for the Summit of the Future, and work towards elaboration of a global digital compact. Our common agenda must provide a roadmap to turbocharge and accelerate our actions towards achieving the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Bhutan welcomes the report's recognition of the need to look beyond GDP. This finds strong resonance with Bhutan's own approach to balanced and human-centered development that we call gross national happiness. It is now widely accepted that this cannot be achieved by tracking GDP alone. Bhutan has always believed that the pursuit of development and progress must respond to a higher calling. We need measures that take into account the full spectrum of human development, as well as the multifaceted factors that provide the enabling environment within which individuals can pursue and achieve the common human aspirations, yet elusive goal of happiness and well-being. This discussion assumes greater urgency as we approach the midpoint towards implementing the 2030 Agenda, in full realization that today, the conflict in Europe and the looming climate emergency have thrown efforts towards achieving the 2030 Agenda and SDGs off course. We need to refocus our priorities by shifting gears and turning our commitments into action, and doing so by working together in the spirit of genuine solidarity. Bhutan welcomed the convening of the Transforming Education Summit on 19 September. His Majesty the King has always accorded the highest importance to the education sector, recognizing that a nation's fate begins in its classrooms and schools. Education is a critical pillar of a country's development and holds the key to unlocking many of our shared global challenges. As His Majesty the King remarked as early as 2014, and I quote, "Education is empowering. It is a social equalizer and it facilitates self-discovery, which leads to realizing one's full potential. Good education gives you confidence, good judgment, virtuous disposition, and the tools to achieve happiness successfully. A good school gives a child a fair shot at success and ensures that a person's achievement in life will not be predetermined by his or her race, parentage, and social connections." Unquote. Mr. President, Bhutan may have been one of the most recent countries to finally reopen its borders since the emergence of the pandemic. As difficult and painful as these past 2.5 years have been, they have allowed for deep reflection at the national level and permitted time for an honest assessment of gaps and challenges. Weaknesses were barred. In some instances, fault lines deepened. We came to the harsh realization that drastic recalibration of our systems were needed if Bhutan is to position itself as a country that is prosperous, resilient, and future-ready. With 1 year remaining before our exit date from the LDC category, these measures will buttress our efforts to ensure that Bhutan's graduation is smooth, sustainable, and irreversible. As I speak, major transformational initiatives are underway in Bhutan to strengthen public service delivery. The entire public sector will be streamlined, strengthened in terms of capacity and performance, held to more rigorous standards of professionalism and accountability. Our public servants must serve the citizens with better and faster public services that they deserve. While universal healthcare is a guarantee enshrined in our Constitution, reforms in the health sector focus on the importance of preparedness for future outbreaks and pandemics, strengthening the quality of healthcare, leveraging technology, and a renewed focus on mental health. The health sector is being reformed to provide not only primary, but secondary and tertiary healthcare to all people within half a day's travel. Specialist services are expanding across the country, including sending mobile teams to screen and treat high-burden diseases. Bhutan's revamped tourism policy was launched with much anticipation on 23rd of September, coinciding with the opening of the international border. Since 1974, Bhutan opened its doors for tourism. We have always followed the policy of high-value, low-volume tourism, which was envisioned by His Majesty the Fourth King of Bhutan. However, the minimal daily tariffs that was instituted was found to be too low, resulting in us becoming a budget destination, leading to mass tourism and its associated problems of increasing waste, decreasing quality of service standards, underemployment of the youth engaged in the sector, never seen traffic jams, and overcrowding of our most religious sites. We have always prioritized the well-being of the people, preserving our environment, our tradition and culture over unsustainable and mindless development. Therefore, in keeping with our development philosophy of GNH, the sector has been restructured and reformed so that it benefits Bhutan not only economically, but socially and environmentally. In the long run, we want to create high-value, authentic, unique experiences for visitors and well-paying professional jobs and businesses for our citizens. Mr. President, the increasing fragmentation, polarization, and growing inequality we witness in the world today only serve as an urgent cry for strengthening multilateralism, for greater political resolve, solidarity, and compassion. It is apparent that no individual, community, or country can overcome contemporary challenges on their own. Interdependence is at the core of our existence, and we must come together through stronger and more effective multilateralism. Bhutan's commitment to multilateralism with the UN at its core remains unwavering. As a small, landlocked, and peaceful country, we remain fully committed to the noble objectives enshrined in the United Nations Charter. Coinciding with the 50th year of membership in the organization, which we marked last year, Bhutan responded to the call to contribute to the maintenance of peace and security, a key pillar and objective of the United Nations. Since then, Bhutan has prepared for the deployment of its first uniformed military unit, a light quick reaction force to a UN peace mission. This process was set in motion in 2014 when we first joined the ranks of UN troop contributing countries. Our well-trained troops will arrive to serve the cause of peace in MINUSCA in the weeks ahead. And I am confident that they will serve the international community with distinction and honor. It is a matter of great pride, and although Bhutan is amongst the smallest members of the United Nations, with this initial deployment, we would rise to the ranks of the top 60 troop contributing countries from 81 at present. Of particular note, consistent with Bhutan's deep commitment to promotion and protection of the environment, Bhutan considers that pursuit of environmentally responsible practices in operations as a moral imperative. We feel strongly that at the minimum, do no harm ethic must drive all aspects of field operations and conduct, and wherever possible, field presences should on their departure be remembered by local communities for the positive legacies that they have left for the host countries. Bhutan has therefore pledged that when Bhutan's uniformed contingent deploys, we will do so in an environmentally sustainable manner with renewable energy, waste management, and provisions of assistance to local communities whom we will serve. The centerpiece of our pledge is the use of solar panels for lighting purposes in the barracks and the camp area. We will carry out plantation of trees around the company location in accordance with the existing policies of that country. While these pledges are modest, our hope is that they will contribute to the overall environmental efforts of UN peacekeeping and demonstrate that such practices can be emulated and scaled. Contribution to UN peacekeeping is a significant milestone in the progression of Bhutan's engagement with the UN. We are sincerely thankful to the international community for the trust and confidence reposed in our ability to meaningfully contribute towards the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, in its 77th year of existence, our organization, the UN, too needs a reboot to be able to meet the challenges of the present day and future and to keep pace and reflect contemporary realities. It must be reformed to respond more effectively to changed global realities and to new and emerging threats that confront us today. Nowhere is this more evident nor urgent than in the growing call for comprehensive reform of the United Nations Security Council. Yet, we note that 43 years since inclusion of the subject in the General Assembly's agenda and nearly 3 decades since the establishment of the GA's open-ended working group on UNSC reforms, we have fallen far short. Lack of progress on UNSC reforms throws into question the relevance and legitimacy of the current global architecture, fragilizes international peace and security, and impinges on the Council's ability to deliver on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. Bhutan has always maintained that reform must accommodate the interests and concerns of all member states, particularly of those unrepresented and underrepresented. Expansion of the Council in both the permanent and non-permanent categories, along with reform of its working methods, constitute essential components of this process. In our view, from Asia, India and Japan must be included as permanent members of a reformed Council. Excellencies, the current challenges facing the world today remind us of our interdependence and imperatives of collaboration and solidarity. While there have been shining examples of international cooperation, we continue to be distrustful with each other. We are less understanding and driven more by self-interest. As the Buddha revealed 2,000 years ago, If we are to end suffering, we must rid ourselves of its three root causes, is what is known as the three poisons, and they are ignorance of impermanence, greed, and hatred. It is these that are the main causes of global problems today. The antidote and traits we can all draw inspiration from is said to be wisdom, sharing, and compassion. These enduring values find consonance in the essence of the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. I thank you and Tashtile.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bhutan. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Melanie Joly, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Canada.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm speaking to you for the first time as Canada's Foreign Minister as we gather in this assembly on the traditional territory of the Nalape people. The Secretary General has said that we are in rough seas, that a winter of global discontent is on the horizon, that we have a duty to act. I agree with him. From Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine and the impacts around the world, to the COVID pandemic, to climate change, to severe conflicts and hardships that now affect billions of people, the challenges we are facing are immense. These crises and the way we choose to respond to them are testing our shared commitment to the United Nations. That's why our decisions matter now more than ever. We have a choice. Either we respect and defend the rules that we collectively have developed for generations and that have given us the longest period of peace in modern history, or we accept that rules can be broken by the powerful, bringing us back to darker times of constant tensions and conflicts, with massive displacements, suffering, and losses of human lives. For Canada, the choice is clear. We're convinced that we need more multilateralism, not less. We need more of the UN, not less. And we need a UN that is effective, efficient, relevant, and accountable. Throughout its history, Canada has strived to act as an honest broker, ready to build bridges between nations and differing points of view. We have worked tirelessly over the years to conceive, develop, and strengthen the international system that we now know. We will continue to do so, and we will continue to do so with all of you. Last week, the Canadian delegation, led by Prime Minister Trudeau, met with leaders and civil society members from around the world. Canada has been listening, and we hear you. Many describe and condemn Russia's further invasion of Ukraine as brutal, illegal, and unjustified, as a violation of the UN Charter. We agree with you. Many describe the uneven recovery from the global COVID-19 pandemic as incompatible with simple fairness, but also as a danger to public health. Again, we agree with you. You shared profound concern that achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is at risk. And we agree we must address this head on. People from all corners of the globe clearly said, Climate change is no longer on the horizon. It is here, and it is hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. This is undeniable. The hearts of all Canadians go out to those affected by the devastating floods in Pakistan, as well as to our fellow citizens who found themselves in the destructive path of Hurricane Fiona. Many conversations this week have focused on the harsh fact that more people are displaced by conflict and violence today than at any point in human history. I heard unmistakable appeals for accountability, including for the victims of Plight PS 752. Women and girls described their needs to have control over their own futures, over their own body, which is their right. Brave individuals shared deeply personal testimonies of their painful experiences of sexual violence and conflict. We believe them. Such violence is unacceptable and it must change. We must empower survivors in leading the path to their recovery and support them in the pursuit of meaningful justice. Freedom of speech, disinformation and misinformation, the protection of minorities, the rule of law, respect for science, facts, and evidence. Powerful statements were made on these issues this week. They speak to an erosion of civic space and democratic dialogue. Canada hears you. We do not come to these discussions with easy fixes. We have come to listen, to engage, and to share our commitments to respond to this moment in a positive way, with purpose and in a spirit of global solidarity. Mr. President, the world has heard terrible stories of Ukrainians losing loved ones to Russia's senseless war. This Assembly has spoken clearly and with conviction. Russia's aggressions against Ukraine violates the UN Charter. It strikes at the heart of the commitment we all made in building this organization from the dark tragedy of the Second World War. Rather than follow this Assembly's decisions and a legally binding order from the International Court of Justice, Russia has doubled down, including with a desperate effort to justify the unjustifiable. While the world gathered here in New York to pursue solutions for the greatest challenges of our time, President Putin informed that he will conscript more young people into his war of choice. He threatened our collective security with reckless and dangerous nuclear rhetoric. For Putin, this is a war to the death. For Ukraine, it is a war for life. Russia's war machine has caused enormous civilian suffering and destruction in Ukraine. The mass graves discovered in Izium are the latest demonstration of Putin's disregard for human life. The impacts of this illegal war are profoundly felt around the world. We must address the global food security crisis and other consequences of the illegal invasion with imagination and determination. And those who break the law must be met with the force of the law. A permanent seat on the Security Council is not a license to kill, nor to silence anyone, and it should never guarantee impunity. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes confrontés à des crises majeures. La pandémie de la COVID-19, les changements climatiques, les conflits. Les crises qui étaient autrefois exceptions sont aujourd'hui la règle. Ces crises mettent à rude épreuve notre capacité d'atteindre les cibles du programme de développement durable à l'horizon 2030. Il nous faut donner un solide coup de barre afin de changer le cours des choses. Un effort de sauvetage urgent et mondial s'impose.
There must be an urgent and
Nous devons nous
global effort
rallier
to
et
save
travailler
these
ensemble
efforts.
pour le bien commun.
We must
La
rally
seule voie
and
possible
work
pour le
together
Canada et
for the
pour le
common
monde
good. The only way
est celle
possible
de la
to
mise
go
en œuvre
forward
de
for
nos
both Canada
objectifs de
and the
développement
world is
durable.
that of achieving our
Du point de vue
SDGs.
économique,
From the
nous avons
economic
encore
point of
beaucoup
view,
à faire
we
pour
have
atteindre
much left to
une
do
véritable
to reach
égalité
a true
entre États
quality
membres.
between member states.
Nous avons bien écouté ce que nos
We have
partenaires,
closely
nos
listened to
amis
what our
des pays
partners
du
and our
Sud nous
friends
ont dit.
from the countries of the South have told us.
Nous entendons leur
We
message
have
de façon
heard their
très
message
claire.
clearly.
Les institutions financières internationales
International
doivent être
financial
réformées.
institutions must be
Elles doivent
reformed.
être capables
They
de
must be
s'adapter
capable
aux
of
crises
adapting
d'aujourd'hui.
to today's crises.
Et le Canada répond
And Canada
présent.
will answer this call.
Aucun pays ne doit être laissé
No
pour compte.
country must be left
Nous
behind.
travaillerons
We are
d'arrache-pied avec
working
nos partenaires
in
pour une
lockstep with our
réforme
partners
juste et
for
équitable
just
du
and
système
equitable
financier
reform of the
mondial.
international
Il en va de
financial
l'équité,
system.
mais aussi
This is
il en va de
crucial
la
for
paix
equity,
et de la
but
stabilité
also
mondiale.
for global peace and
Monsieur le
stability.
Président,
Mr.
la
President,
pandémie de la
the
COVID-19 a fauché la vie de
COVID-19
près de
pandemic has taken the lives
6,5
of
millions
almost
de
6.5
personnes à
million
travers le
people
monde.
throughout the world.
Le Canada est déterminé
is
à mettre fin à cette
determined to
pandémie
end
et
this
à en prévenir
pandemic
d'autres.
and to prevent
Ensemble,
any
nous
others.
allons poursuivre le
Together,
combat contre le VIH,
we will
la
continue to
tuberculose
combat
et la malaria.
HIV,
La
tuberculosis,
semaine dernière,
and malaria.
le Premier
Last
ministre
week,
Trudeau s'est
Prime
engagé à
Minister
investir
Trudeau
1,2
committed
milliard
to
de dollars
investing
pour soutenir
$1.2
ces
billion
efforts.
to support these efforts.
Parlons maintenant de changement
Let
climatique.
us now turn to climate change.
Nous devons agir avec le
We
même
must
sentiment
act with the
d'urgence
same
que
sense of
celui que
urgency
nous avons démontré
as
durant la
was
pandémie
seen
de la
during
COVID.
the COVID-19
La
pandemic.
science nous le dit, nous devons en faire
Science has
plus
told
et
us
plus
that we must do
rapidement.
more and we must do it more
L'ouragan
quickly.
Fiona, qui a frappé
Hurricane
plusieurs îles des
Fiona, which
Antilles
struck
et l'est
several
du
of the
Canada, n'en est
islands
que
of
le
the
dernier
Antilles and
exemple.
eastern Canada,
De
is but the latest
l'Arctique
example.
aux petits États
From the
insulaires,
Arctic to
les
the small
dérèglements
island states,
climatiques
climate
constituent une
change
menace
is an
existentielle.
existential
Nous en
threat.
subissons les effets à
And
chaque
we are
jour.
feeling its effects every day.
Le Canada s'est engagé à
Canada
réduire
has
ses
committed
émissions
to
de gaz à
reducing
effet de serre de 40 à
greenhouse gas
45%
emissions
d'ici 2030,
by 40
puis
to
d'atteindre
45%
la
by 2030 and to achieve carbon
d'ici
neutrality
2050.
by
Et
2050.
nous nous sommes dotés d'un plan
And we
crédible
have
pour y
a
arriver.
credible plan to do so.
Le Canada participera à la COP27.
Canada will participate in
Nous avons
COP27 in
bien
Egypt.
hâte d'accueillir le
And we
monde
look
entier
forward
chez moi,
to
à Montréal, pour
welcoming
la
the world
COP15 sur la
to my home,
biodiversité, sous la
Montreal,
présidence de la
for
Chine.
COP15 on biodiversity
Notre priorité
under
est
the
d'assurer le
presidency
succès
of
de cette
China.
conférence
Our
où nous
priority is
travaillerons
to ensure the
ensemble
success of this
pour
conference,
renverser la
where we
perte
will work
alarmante
together
d'espèces
to reverse this
animales
alarming loss
et
of
végétales.
flora and
Il en va de
fauna.
notre propre survie.
Our own survival is at stake.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
il n'y a pas de
President,
solution simple
there are
aux
no
défis auxquels
simple
nous sommes
solutions to the
confrontés.
challenges we are facing.
Mais il est évident
But it is
que
clear
de s'isoler,
that to
de
isolate
mépriser la
ourselves,
règle de droit
to disregard
et de
the rule of
réduire
law,
les gens au
and to
silence
force people
est
into
contraire au
silence
progrès.
runs counter to
Et pourtant,
progress.
certains
And
pays
yet,
restreignent
certain
les
countries
libertés
are
civiles,
restricting
violent les
civil
droits de la personne
liberties,
et
violating human
surveillent
rights,
massivement
and
leur
are
population.
conducting widespread
Cette
surveillance of their
tendance vers
population.
l'autoritarisme
This
est de
trend
plus
towards
inquiétante.
authoritarianism is
Ce phénomène
extremely
est
worrying.
particulièrement
This
visible dans la
phenomenon
région
is
du
particularly
Xinjiang
seen
en
in
Chine.
the Xinjiang
À
region of
cet
China.
effet, la publication du
Here, the
rapport des Nations
publication
Unies
of the
sur les
United
droits de la
Nations
personne
report on human
constitue
rights
une étape
is an
essentielle.
essential step.
Ces conclusions reflètent d'ailleurs
Moreover,
des
its
récits crédibles
conclusions
d'abus
reflect
constituant des
credible
crimes contre
accounts of
l'humanité.
abuse which
Le Canada
constitute crimes
s'inquiète
against
de la
humanity.
répression des droits humains
Canada is
que nous
concerned
observons dans
about
plusieurs
the
pays.
repression of human rights that we see in several
L'universalité
countries.
des droits de la
Universality
personne
of
est
human
bien
rights is well known.
On le sait, ces droits humains sont
We know that these human
universels
rights
par
are
nature.
universal by nature.
On ne peut donc se cacher derrière des
Therefore, we
prétextes
cannot hide
de
behind
souveraineté
the
nationale
pretext
pour
of
les violer.
national sovereignty to
Il y a
violate
des
them.
limites
There are
à défendre
limits
l'indéfendable.
to defending the indefensible.
Nous sommes d'avis que la démocratie,
We
bien
are
que
of the view
parfaite,
that
reste le
democracy,
meilleur
although
système pour
imperfect,
protéger les droits de la
remains
personne
the
et pour
best system
progresser en
to
matière de
protect human
développement
rights
durable.
and to make progress
Toutes
in
nos
sustainable
démocraties font
development.
face à des défis.
All our democracies are
Chez
facing
nous, comme comme ailleurs,
at
nous
home and
devons
abroad,
composer avec
we must
l'apathie,
also deal with
l'anxiété
apathy,
et la méfiance envers
anxiety,
nos
and
institutions.
the distrust of our institutions.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
le Canada est également
Canada
déterminé
is
à
also
combattre le
determined
racisme
to combat
systémique.
systemic
Nous continuons à
racism,
prendre des
and we will
mesures
continue
concrètes
to take
pour
concrete
poursuivre la
measures
voie de
to
la
pursue the path of
réconciliation avec les peuples
reconciliation
autochtones.
with the indigenous
En
peoples.
2017,
In 2017,
le Premier ministre Trudeau a prononcé
Prime
ici,
Minister
en cette
Trudeau
Chambre, un
delivered
discours
a statement
important
here
et a parlé de notre
and spoke
propre héritage
of our
du
own
colonialisme au
heritage
Canada.
of colonialism
Nous
in
travaillons
Canada.
sans relâche We are working unceasingly to rectify this dark chapter in our history, and we know that the full participation of indigenous peoples is fundamental to the development of a more just world.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
l'égalité des femmes et des filles dans toute leur diversité est primordiale à la paix, à la justice et à la prospérité.
Justice and
Comme c'est le cas pour
prosperity.
plusieurs
As is the
pays,
case in several
le Canada
countries,
est fier
Canada
d'avoir une
is
politique
proud
étrangère féministe.
to have a
Ensemble,
feminist foreign policy.
nous bâtissons
Together,
une
we are building
coalition
a
mondiale
global
en appui à
coalition
l'égalité.
to support equality.
C'est ainsi que nous allons
It is in
repousser
this
les
way
attaques
that we will
croissantes
repel these
contre les droits et
increasing
libertés des
attacks
femmes.
on the rights
En
and
Afghanistan,
freedoms of women.
les talibans
In
empêchent les femmes
Afghanistan,
et les filles
Taliban
d'aller
is
à l'école.
preventing women
Au
and
Myanmar,
girls from going to
les
school.
femmes courageuses
In
qui
Myanmar,
réclament haut et fort
courageous
le
women
retour
who are
du système
openly calling for a
démocratique
return to
sont
democracy
emprisonnées par la
are
junte
imprisoned
militaire,
by the military junta,
torturées
tortured,
et sujettes à
and
d'affreux actes de violence
subjected to
sexuelle.
horrific acts of sexual violence.
Mr. President, in Iran, women protesting the death of Mahsa Amini are met with arrests and bullets. We salute their courage and join them in sending a strong message that women's rights are human rights. Today, Prime Minister Trudeau announced that Canada will sanction those responsible, including Iran's so-called morality police and its leadership. From Sudan to Haiti, women peace builders, human rights defenders, and activists are being targeted. We must continue to speak up for the rights of women and girls and to support, protect, recognize, and include women peace builders. We must also relentlessly pursue accountability for sexual violence. We will continue to push for justice for Rohingya women, and we will not rest until those responsible for sexual violence committed in Ukraine are held to account. The UN Charter enshrines faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of human person, in the equal rights of men and women. And yet, we are seeing rising violence, the widening crackdown on rights and freedoms, the exclusion of women and girls from the negotiating table, the boardroom, the classroom. Sexual and reproductive health rights for women and girls are being rolled back or denied in too many countries. None of this is by accident. These are all deliberate choices. To all women in this room and women around the world, we hear you. And Canada will always stand up for your right to choose. We will fight for your full, equal, and meaningful participation in all walks of life. We will speak up for your rights and dignity. No government, no politician, no judge, no one can take that away from you. Mr. President, as I've said, the world needs more multilateralism, more of the UN, not less. To do so, we must restore trust among us. The crises we're facing have shown both the strengths and weaknesses of the structures we built nearly 80 years ago. We have been able to respond to this more serious hardship with compassion and effectiveness. But we can do better. Political paralysis and the abuse of the veto are undermining the Security Council. We encourage efforts to reduce the power of the veto, to expand membership, and to ensure the voices of all are heard and responded to across the whole UN system. UN peace operations also demand our efforts. Today, peacekeeping faces immense challenges. Canada has long contributed to UN efforts to reduce conflict, and we will continue to do so. Engagement with the United Nations is a core commitment of Canadians. We were there at the UN's creation, and today we are more engaged than ever. We will always engage
with candor and directness, because we do not equate diplomacy with deception or global politics with global platitudes. The UN Charter begins with the words, "We, the peoples of the world." We must remember that the fate of billions of people alive today and those yet to be born is at stake in all the work we do. We owe them our best effort of heart, mind, and soul. We can meet the test that time and circumstance have placed before us with hope, with courage, and with a commitment to act for citizens today and for future generations to follow. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Canada. I now give the floor to His Excellency Legion Mbela Mbela, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cameroon.
Monsieur le Président
Mr. President
de l'Assemblée générale,
of the General Assembly,
Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs de délégation,
ladies, gentlemen, heads of delegations,
Monsieur le Secrétaire général des
Secretary
Nations
General
Unies,
of the United Nations,
Mesdames, Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen,
permettez-moi tout d'abord,
allow me,
au nom du Président
the outset,
de la
on
République
behalf
du Cameroun,
of the President of the Republic
Son
of
Excellence Paul
Cameroon,
Biya,
His Excellency Paul
qui
Biya,
m'a fait l'insigne honneur
was granted
de
me the
nous
singular
représenter
honor
à ces
of
importantes
representing him
assises,
this
de vous féliciter,
important meeting to
Monsieur le
congratulate
Président,
you, Mr. President,
ainsi que tous les membres
as
de
well
votre
as
bureau
the other
pour
members of your
votre
bureau
brillante élection
on your
à la
brilliant
présidence
election
de
as
cette
the President of this
77e
77th session
de l'Assemblée
of
générale.
the General Assembly.
Je saisis cette occasion
I take this
pour
opportunity
vous assurer du
to
soutien
assure you
de la
of the
délégation
support of
camerounaise
the Cameroonian
en vue de
delegation
l'atteinte des objectifs
in
que vous
achieving
vous êtes
the
fixés.
objectives that you have set.
Je voudrais aussi saluer votre prédécesseur,
I would also like to
le ministre Abdullah Shahid
salute your
Maldives,
predecessor, Mr.
pour
Abdullah
la
Shahid of the
disponibilité
Maldives, for
et
the
l'efficacité avec
availability and
lesquelles
efficiency
il a assuré son mandat
with which he
tout au long de
carried
la
out his
76e
mandate
session.
throughout the 76th session.
Enfin,
Finally,
permettez-moi de redire toute notre appréciation
allow me to
à
reiterate
notre
our
secrétaire
sincerest
général,
appreciation
M.
to our
Antonio
Secretary General,
Guterres,
Mr. Antonio Guterres,
qui, malgré les défis et les temps
who,
difficiles de l'heure,
despite the challenges
a su
and
garder le cap
the difficult times of the
en
hour, has managed to
s'impliquant
stay
avec courage,
the course
détermination et dévouement à la
and
défense des principes inscrits
defend
dans la
the
Charte
principles
des Nations
enshrined
Unies.
in the Charter of the United Nations with
Monsieur le
courage,
Président,
determination, and dedication.
Vous avez proposé que le présent débat général soit
Mr.
articulé
President, you have proposed
autour
that
du
this
thème
general debate
intitulé
be structured
tournant
around
décisif.
the theme,
les
a
solutions
watershed moment,
transformatrices
transformative
face à des
solutions
défis intriqués.
to interlocking challenges.
Ce thème vient à point nommé
This theme
dans un contexte
comes
particulièrement difficile
at an opportune time in
où
a
la
particularly
pandémie à
difficult context
COVID-19 depuis
as
bientôt
the
3 ans
COVID-19 pandemic
continue
has,
d'affecter le cours
for
et
almost
la
3
gestion
years now,
des
continued to
affaires du monde,
affect the
dont la
course and the management
complexité
of
au
world
niveau
affairs
global, régional
the complexity of which at the global, regional, and sub-regional levels does not require any further demonstration. On the political level, rivalries for power, interest, and hegemony are developing all over the world. As a corollary, the arms race is intensifying and becoming increasingly more refined. Above all, the seas and oceans in space, including outer space. Many hotbeds of tension in various regions around the world are serving as theaters of operation for various shocks to play out, and the waves and collateral effects of those are amplifying the threats and the suffering that already weigh heavily on peoples and nations in terms of loss of human life, material losses, migration, environmental degradation, disruption of financial systems, food and energy crises, to name just a few. That is the case in the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe, which we have been witnessing for over 6 months. Indeed, the government of Cameroon has been closely following the situation regarding the confrontation between Ukraine and Russia. As you are aware, the peaceful settlement of disputes between states has always been one of the fundamental principles of my country's foreign policy. In this respect, Cameroon has, from the very beginning of the crisis, reiterated its position by calling on the two parties to open negotiations with a view to reaching a concerted solution so that the ideals of peace, security, and sustainable development which underpin our organization can triumph. On the African continent, these hotbeds of tension also persist. In our efforts to find solutions, we regrettably see that some of our partners often come with preconceived one-size-fits-all recipes and solutions. Given these trends, which continue year after year, it is important for Africa's voice to be heard, to be listened to and supported, especially when that voice comes through the African Union. On the economic, social, and cultural levels, the improvements observed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic are gradually giving way to a slowdown and even decline in the progress and hope born of the bold measures taken multilaterally and nationally since the beginning of the 2000s. On the legal front, international commitments are no longer being respected or are being delivered on in dribs and drabs due to selfishness, insufficient political will, and even the crisis that is currently being observed in multilateralism. In such a context, it is no exaggeration to state that the fate of man and the destiny of humanity are at stake. Mr. President, the first challenge of the hour, one global and urgent in nature, is the climate crisis. It is no secret to anyone that the climate is changing. The cycle of seasons is disrupted. Fires are increasingly taking place, as well as unprecedented floods and hurricanes in various regions of the world. Temperatures are reaching worrying levels. And bodies of water, such as Lake Chad, which are a source of life and prosperity for local populations, are being reduced to their bare minimum levels. This is a place to call for respecting the commitments made within the framework of various international conferences on climate change. Thus, it is more urgent than ever to take action to finalize the rules for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, in particular with regard to mobilizing financial resources for developing countries and raising global climate ambition. COP27, which is scheduled to take place in Egypt at the end of this year, will be of crucial importance in this regard. It must provide urgent and decisive answers for the survival of the planet and better address this concern with innovative technologies. The fight against climate change is everyone's fight. It is a fight for everyone and for every day. It is truly a universal responsibility. Aware of this major challenge and of its responsibilities, Cameroon has made the commitment to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions and has set up an appropriate legal and institutional framework in order to achieve this goal. Thanks to the forest mass of the Congo Basin, one of the environmental lungs of the globe, the countries of Central Africa, united within COMEFAC, are making a major contribution to the search for solutions to climate change throughout the world. They ask, in turn, that sufficient financial and technological resources, which are regularly promised by developed countries, be granted to them in order to enable them to preserve, maintain, and regenerate this important environmental basin. The same goes for financing necessary to implement projects designed as part of the Green Sahel Initiative or the restoration of the Lake Chad Basin. Moreover, on the occasion of the review of its nationally determined contribution, or NDC, Cameroon has reaffirmed its commitment to this international effort by increasing its greenhouse gas reduction commitments from 32 to 35%, including 12% unconditional and 23% conditional on support from the international community in order to address climate change. For Cameroon, combating climate change is seen as a development opportunity rather than an insurmountable challenge. Every country holds one of the digits of the access code to a new era where the planet can breathe new clean air without carbon but rich in oxygen. The younger generations challenge us to take action rather than simply making grand wishes. Mr. President, like other priority threats, the issue of migration is pressing. Despite the efforts made by the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, as well as efforts made by host countries and development partners, millions of people continue to flee their homes and their homelands to live in deplorable and inhuman conditions, and this due to conflicts, disasters, and multiple calamities. Faced with the scope of this human tragedy, which appeals to our collective conscience, we have a historic responsibility, a responsibility to act. And my country does not intend to shirk this responsibility. Faithful to its secular tradition of tolerance and hospitality, Cameroon has always been a land that hosts refugees as well as those in transit. Because of its stability, for many populations, it represents a refuge as they search for peace. As you know, Cameroon is currently hosting more than 500,000 refugees and asylum seekers, which puts it 19th in the world ranking of refugee hosting countries. In addition to the tripartite convention signed with UNHCR and affected countries in order to facilitate the return and resettlement of refugees in their country of origin, in April, my country hosted a regional ministerial conference on solutions for forced displacement linked to the Central African crisis. This conference, held pursuant to the Declaration of Yaoundé, which proposes common solutions, inclusive solutions for forced displaced persons in Central Africa. My country is an active participant in all of these initiatives in accordance with the Global Compact on Refugees. Turning to a different point, we also condemn the persistence of terrorism and violent extremism, whose impacts continue to weigh on the world order. Many regions are suffering from the resurgence of subversive operations carried out primarily by terrorist organizations such as Boko Haram, which is rampant in the Lake Chad Basin. The northern part of Cameroon is also seriously affected by this. Faced with the threat and exponential progression of terrorism in various regions of the globe, my country reiterates its call for strengthening and pooling strategies to combat terrorism. This pooling of efforts would seek to effectively fight this threat in all its forms and manifestations, as well as to strengthen the capacity of sovereign states that fall victim to this phenomenon to track and neutralize terrorists, to identify financing solutions, and amend and implement international and regional agreements to punish terrorism, which is constantly evolving. The international community must continue to play its part in strict respect for the sovereignty of states in order to rebuild and strengthen the stability that has been undermined in these areas. We thank our bilateral and multilateral partners who provide assistance to the joint multinational force that has been set up in the Lake Chad Basin to combat and eradicate Boko Haram. This assistance deserves to be increased given not only the proliferation of regional terrorist groups affiliated with the Islamic State, but also the increasingly sophisticated means used by these terrorist cells as they grow in number thanks to the enrollment of combatants from former terrorist hotbeds that have since been cleared. Mr. President, it is imperative for the international community to continue investing in the fight against poverty and inequality. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, strengthened by our common agenda formulated by the Secretary General, must be actively supported and fully implemented. What is most lacking at the moment for the implementation of this is financial and technological means, as well as synergy between the partners involved in its implementation. Cameroon is very committed to this path, as demonstrated by its recent presentation of its voluntary national program at the high-level political forum of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. Mr. President, due to its commitment to peace, territorial integrity, and its policy of national integration, my country's government continues to demonstrate openness and willingness to engage in dialogue to put an end to the socio-political crisis in the northwest and southwest regions. Thus, after holding our Grand National Dialogue in 2019, we continued the process of accelerating and further deepening decentralization. The centers for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration established in these regions, as well as in that of the far north, welcome and train large numbers of my young compatriots who have laid down their arms and renounced violence. The state is exercising its sovereign prerogatives throughout the entirety of the national territory. The current challenge facing our government is to continue implementing reconstruction efforts in areas affected by various challenges through our plan for the restoration of the above-mentioned regions, together with the UNDP. At this stage, I would like to sincerely commend the dynamic efforts and contribution of the UNDP in this area, and I take this opportunity to thank our bilateral and multilateral partners who are contributing to these various mechanisms, which are true tools for building peace in Cameroon. I also launch a heartfelt appeal to the international community to mobilize more actively to support these plans in order to allow my country to continue remaining a heaven of peace, the heaven of peace that it has always been. More broadly, regionalization in my country is underway, and it continues to strengthen the participation of Cameroonese citizens in running the country's affairs. These advances show that Cameroon has irreversibly and resolutely committed to the path of gradually implementing and building the democratic projects to respond to the legitimate desires of the Cameroonese people, as well as its own economic emergence plan for the period through 2035. In this, Cameroon promotes in all circumstances and thanks to the structures that it has established to this end a constructive, regular dialogue between the various components of its population and members of the diaspora in order to mobilize them for the work ahead. Mr. President, Cameroon is firmly committed and supports a reformed and reinvigorated international order, authentic multilateralism based on the ideals, purposes, and principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter by the founding fathers of our organization. Here, I wish to reiterate our support for the reform currently underway within the United Nations and the goal of creating a Security Council that is more representative, equitable, and efficient. With a view to achieving this and as part of the democratization of United Nations institutions, Cameroon reiterates its support for the Esselwini Consensus and the Sirt Declaration, which were unanimously adopted by the heads of African states. Mr. President, to conclude my remarks, Cameroon reaffirms its support for all of the reforms currently in progress that seek to revitalize the General Assembly, strengthen the Economic and Social Council, and streamline the Secretariat, following the agenda set by the member states of our organization in order to strengthen its stature and its ability to better address the global challenges of our era. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cameroon. I now give the floor to His Excellency Bharat Raj Paudyal, Foreign Secretary of Nepal.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I begin by congratulating you, Mr. President, on your unanimous election to preside over the 77th session of the General Assembly. I also express appreciation to your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, for successfully steering the 76th session. My deep appreciation goes to UN Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres for his commendable efforts to promote global peace, security, human rights, and development. There could have been no better time to deliberate on a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges, the theme of this year's general debate. Mr. President, we are living indeed in a watershed moment. A moment when the COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical tensions, inequalities, and climate crisis threaten our pursuit of peace and prosperity. A moment when the values of solidarity and cooperation are put to test with trust and confidence in short supply. A moment when humanity is caught between hope and despair, unity and division, and harmony and dissension. And a moment when the world is striving to forge a new consensus amid competing interests, priorities, and challenges. For the third year in a row, COVID-19 continues to add strain to our lives, livelihoods, and economies. But there is a hope. The production and availability of COVID-19 vaccines has minimized the risk and severity of the disease and enhanced our ability to save lives. In Nepal, we have been able to fully vaccinate 96% of the target population, with almost everyone receiving at least one dose. We thank our immediate neighbors, India and China, our development partners, and the United Nations system for their valuable support. But this is not the case everywhere. Poor and vulnerable people in many parts of the world have still been kept away from the doors of hope. The pandemic will not end unless it ends for all people in all countries. We must ensure vaccine equity so that no one is left behind.
Excellencies, the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals are at risk. The pandemic has hit hard on our march into the decade of action. This has been followed by cascading crises marked by geopolitical divides, disruption of supply chain, and climate emergency. The resulting high food and fuel prices, massive inflation, and debt burden severely hit the limited fiscal capacity of the poorer countries, especially the least developed ones. All these crises have cumulative negative impact on financing of the SDGs. It is more acute in the countries in special situations like the LDCs, LADCs, and the SIDS. As per the pre-pandemic estimate, Nepal would require an average annual investment of $19 billion to achieve the SDGs. With the shortfall of financing, our hard-earned development gains are at risk. At a time, we are preparing to graduate from the LDC status by 2026. However, graduation is our long-held aspiration, and we remain committed to using this opportunity to bring a structural transformation to the national economy. We will do everything possible to make our graduation process smooth, sustainable, and irreversible. For this, we need additional international support in the form of investment, technology transfer, aid for trade, and technical assistance. This is critical for us to recover from the pandemic, rescue the SDGs, and turn global partnership into a reality. Mr. President, no country can thrive without integration into the global market. The rising tide of protectionism and stalled trade negotiations are delaying the much-needed reform in international trading system, which is tipped in favor of some. The poorer countries are yet to benefit from it. We must ensure open, fair, and transparent trade rules so that all countries can benefit from it. Similarly, the current global financial system has seriously failed the developing world. It is unfair to continue this undemocratic and unresponsive system. We call for the much-needed reform of the international financial architecture for making it inclusive, fair, and equally beneficial to all. The countries under debt stress need urgent debt relief, restructuring, and cancellation. The international community must swiftly help them come out of their debt crisis. Mr. President, in Nepal, we are bearing the disproportionate burden of climate change and facing climate shocks such as frequent landslides, storms, floods, and wildfires. The melting of glaciers and the drying up of snow-fed rivers have been adversely affecting the lives and livelihoods of people downstream and rendering us one of the most vulnerable countries. Our region recently experienced the heartbreaking loss of lives and properties due to unusually heavy downpours, melting of the glaciers, and resulting floods. To combat the climate crisis and address vulnerabilities, we have localized the adaptation plans. While remaining fully committed to the Paris Agreement on climate change, we have set ambitious target of reaching a net zero scenario by 2045, as announced by the Prime Minister of Nepal, Right Honorable Mr. Sherbahadur Deuba, during the COP26. However, climate change is a global problem, and it needs global action. For this, the large emitters, which account for over 80% of all global emissions, must take bold steps to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius climate goal alive. The commitment of $100 billion of climate financing must turn into a reality. The COP27 needs to move from pledges into action. Distinguished delegates, geopolitics and polarization have pushed global peace and security into peril. The world is becoming more complex with rising transnational challenges such as terrorism, radicalism, extremism, and mass migration. Today, the world faces highest number of violent conflicts since 1945, within and between countries divided by the fault lines of race, religion, ethnicity, and origin. The question that keeps us hunting today is whether enough is being done to protect the people from the scourge of wars, preventing them from happening in the first place. Investment in the prevention of conflicts is more effective than addressing their consequences. The technological advancement today has the capacity to inflict devastating physical action instantly, and yet it is appalling to see how our world body gets crippled when it comes to the interplay of interest of the major powers at the UN Security Council. As our dependence on new technology deepens, the issue of cybersecurity emerges as one of the greatest challenges that demands our collective resolve to setting norms and building capacity to prevent the threat it poses. We must also put in place the necessary safeguards to curb the malicious use of new technologies. Mr. President, in 2021, global military spending surpassed $2 trillion. Countries are chasing an elusive notion of security by leaving behind billions of people hungry, sick, and destitute. Genuine security depends on the ability to address the underlying causes of the conflict, that is poverty, hunger, and unemployment. Stockpile of nuclear arsenals constitutes perennial threat to humanity. Therefore, elimination of them is the only guarantee of the non-use of these weapons in the future. Nepal reiterates its call for general and complete disarmament of all weapons of mass destruction, including biological, chemical, nuclear, and radiological weapons in a time-bound manner. Nepal opposes the arms race in outer space and emphasizes on the peaceful use of it for the benefit of humankind. As the host of the UN Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Asia and the Pacific, Nepal continues to support regional disarmament initiatives as building blocks of global disarmament. We remain committed to reviving the Kathmandu process, which we believe complements global arms control and disarmament efforts. Nepal condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and calls for an early conclusion of a comprehensive convention against terrorism. Mr. President, we are deeply concerned about the death and suffering of civilians in the war in Ukraine. We call for an urgent cessation of hostilities and violence and urge all concerned parties to exercise maximum restraint and return to the path of dialogue. Nepal opposes any threat or use of force against the territorial integrity, political independence, and sovereignty of a country under any pretext and circumstance. Afghanistan has remained on the precipice of uncertainties and violence. The Afghan people are exposed to a shocking level of poverty and humanitarian sufferings. We call that unhindered humanitarian aid and public services, including health and education, for all sections of the Afghan society must be ensured. We urge all parties concerned in Myanmar to respect the will of the people to elect their representatives, paving the way to restore the democratic process. The people in Libya, Syria, and Yemen have been facing hardship and sufferings for long. The concerned parties need to resort to peaceful means of conflict resolution to end the violence and return to peace. Protracted violence and conflicts continue to inflict pain and suffering on Palestinian and Israeli population. Nepal reiterates its long-standing view for a two-state solution, whereby Palestine and Israel live side by side in peace and security within the recognized international borders. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Nepal pursues path of democratic system with people's welfare at the center. Our democratic process is characterized by people's struggle, sacrifice, dialogue, and resilience. In May this year, we successfully held democratic elections to the local governments in peaceful, free, and fair manner. We are now set to hold periodic elections for federal parliament and provincial assemblies in November this year. For a democracy like Nepal, these are much more than just periodic elections. They are the testament to our ability of ensuring peaceful transfer of power. They are the means to enhance people's trust in democracy, promote legitimacy and accountability, and strengthen the rule of law. The principles of inclusion and participation constitute the core of Nepal's governance system. The Constitution of Nepal guarantees the proportional representation and participation of all sections of our society in national life. It guarantees at least 33% representation of women in federal and provincial parliaments and 40% at the local government level. As a result, the participation of women, youth, and disadvantaged groups has increased significantly in politics and other spheres of national life. It has not only ensured their rightful place, but also injected dynamism, justice, and fairness into society. Mr. President, Nepal's commitment to human rights is unequivocal. The Constitution of Nepal incorporates universally recognized human rights and fundamental freedoms. As a member of the UN Human Rights Council, for the second consecutive term, Nepal continues to add value to the work of the Council. Our approach to human rights is firmly grounded in the principles of universality, indivisibility, objectivity, and non-selectivity. We are committed to concluding the transitional justice process by addressing the concerns of the victims, complying with the directives of the Supreme Court, abiding by the spirit of comprehensive peace accord, and our relevant international commitments. Taking this in earnest, the government of Nepal presented an amendment bill to the Parliament to reform the related laws. We uphold the rights of the child as the most sacred obligation of the state, with their protection, well-being, health, education, and development at the center. We attach high importance to the safety, security, dignity, and well-being of migrant workers, and emphasize on the effective implementation of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. We also attach high importance on quality education, skills, entrepreneurship, and employment to the youth to unleash their potentials for sustained economic development, peace, and prosperity in society. We recognize the significant role that diaspora can play to bring capital, technology, and skills to the country of origin. Though we are not a party to Refugee Convention and its protocol, we have been hosting thousands of refugees on humanitarian grounds. We believe that forced eviction of citizens anywhere and under any circumstances is a grave crime. Refugees' right to return to their homeland in safety, honor, and dignity must always be ensured. Excellencies, the cardinal principles of seeing the world as one family shapes our worldview in external relations. Our foreign policy dwells on the notion of peace, non-violence, and non-aggression, which find their eloquent expression in the teachings of Gautam Buddha, the enlightened son of Nepal. Nepal enjoys cordial relations with all countries around the world. This is a result of both my country's historical evolution and the friendly nature of our people. Given the goodwill Nepal receives from our friends, we feel it to contribute more for international peace, progress, and social justice. We engage with our neighbors and friends in the international community based on the principles of the UN Charter, non-alignment, Panchashila, international law, and the norms of world peace. We play an active role in SHARC, BIMSTEC, and ACD to promote regional cooperation. Our partnership with the United Nations has been built on the foundation of trust and cooperation. We firmly believe in multilateralism, with the United Nations at its center. With its unmatched coverage, legitimacy, and convening power, the United Nations is the most appropriate forum for promoting global cooperation based on sovereign equality and mutual respect. Currently, the second largest troops and police contributing country, Nepal has been a consistent contributor to UN peacekeeping for the last 6.5 decades. We have deployed our peacekeepers at every call and without caveat, even in difficult situations. Nepal supports all major initiatives aimed at reforming UN peace operations. We have endorsed the Kigali Principles, the Action for Peacekeeping, and A for P Plus initiatives, among others. We have zero-case policy against sexual exploitation and abuse in peace operations. We condemn the targeted attacks against the Blue Helmets. Perpetrators of such crimes should be brought to justice. We believe that countries should have fair share of leadership positions at the headquarters and in the field, according to the level and history of their contribution to UN peacekeeping. Nepal supports UN reform initiatives, including revitalizing the General Assembly and reforming the Security Council to make it more representative, inclusive, and transparent. We also support reform initiatives based on the Secretary General's report, Our Common Agenda. These endeavors will not produce results unless the member states take bold and transformative steps to make our organization fit for the future. We must enable the UN to deliver on the needs of the farthest behind the first. To conclude, Mr. President, the decisions we make today will determine what our future will look like. Our choice to act or not to act will have a huge impact on generations to come. Let us look at what opportunities lie ahead for us. Let us give solidarity and cooperation a chance. As a peace-loving country, Nepal remains committed to contributing to our collective efforts of making this world peaceful, prosperous, and equitable. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Foreign Secretary of Nepal. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mark Herman Ninadu Araba, Chair of the Delegation of Benin.
Monsieur le Président de la 77e session de l'Assemblée générale, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, distingués délégués, il m'échoit le privilège et l'insigne honneur, au nom de M. Patrice Talon, président de la République du Bénin, de délivrer l'allocution Je voudrais, à l'entame de mon propos, vous adresser, Monsieur le Président, mes chaleureuses félicitations pour votre brillante élection à la présidence de cette 77e session de l'Assemblée générale. Je voudrais également adresser mes félicitations à votre prédécesseur, Son Excellence M. Abdullah Shahid, et à son équipe pour le travail remarquable accompli avec compétence et dévouement pendant le mandat et qui mérite d'être salué.
For the remarkable work done with dedication and skill during his mandate, which deserves to be praised. I also pay tribute to the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, with our appreciation for the laudable efforts he tirelessly makes alongside the members to realize the noble objectives of our shared organization. President, Excellencies, constitue un appel pressant à l'action. En effet, la présente session se tient dans un contexte international difficile, marqué par les conséquences conjuguées de la pandémie de la COVID-19 et de la guerre en Ukraine, avec leurs impacts économiques, politiques, sociaux sur le monde entier. En matière de paix et sécurité, premier pilier de l'action de notre organisation et au plan global, une action de notre part de l'avis de ma délégation et conformément à la position clairement exprimée par l'Union africaine, appelle au respect impératif du droit international, de l'intégrité territoriale et de la souveraineté nationale de l'Ukraine. Aussi, exhortons-nous instamment les parties en conflit à l'instauration immédiate d'un cessez-le-feu et à l'ouverture sans délai des négociations politiques afin de préserver le monde des conséquences d'un conflit planétaire. Au plan régional, en l'occurrence dans la zone de l'Afrique de l'Ouest à laquelle appartient le Bénin, la paix et la sécurité sont menacées par les effets conjugués de la menace terroriste d'une part et de celle de la piraterie maritime d'autre part, qui constituent des entraves majeures à la libre circulation des personnes et des biens, ainsi qu'au développement des nations concernées. Ces obstacles, loin d'être des problématiques purement régionales, constituent une menace globale et appellent une réponse immédiate, cohérente et intégrée de la communauté des nations. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, en matière de développement, deuxième pilier de l'action des Nations Unies, le temps n'est plus au diagnostic, puisque nous nous sommes déjà dotés du programme de développement durable à l'horizon 2030, dont les articulations nous offrent un véritable plan d'action pour l'humanité, la planète, dans l'immédiat et pour la postérité, dans une démarche prospective. Consciente de ses responsabilités, l'Afrique, à travers la formulation de lancement d'une vision transformatrice pour le continent, l'Afrique que nous voulons, incarnée par l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine, s'est résolument engagée en faveur de son intégration économique et de l'accélération de son industrialisation, avec valeur ajoutée et une intégration accrue dans les chaînes de valeur mondiales. C'est dire que la problématique du développement de l'Afrique, en tant qu'une des 8 grandes priorités des Nations Unies, doit continuer de faire l'objet de réflexions fécondes, comme cela a été le cas en juillet dernier lors du dialogue de haut niveau sur l'Afrique organisé conjointement par l'Assemblée générale et le Conseil économique et social. Il urge toutefois, en cette décennie d'action, que des actions concrètes et hardies accompagnent les réflexions afin que des solutions soient apportées aux préoccupations qui sont celles du continent africain. Le Bénin, pour sa part, s'est résolument engagé pour assurer à tous un minimum social commun en s'investissant sans relâche en faveur de la satisfaction des besoins vitaux de tous ces citoyens qui sont se vêtir décemment, se nourrir convenablement, se loger dignement, se soigner correctement et s'instruire de façon idoine. À cette fin, et en sus des réformes courageuses en matière de bonne gouvernance et de mobilisation optimale des ressources financières internes, le gouvernement du Bénin s'investit à trouver des sources novatrices de mobilisation de fonds nécessaires à son développement à travers les missions avec succès de rebond spécial ODD par exemple. Il urge qu'un soutien robuste et approprié soit apporté à nos pays en appui aux efforts consentis par eux-mêmes afin de consolider et de pérenniser les acquis engrangés d'une part et de relever efficacement les défis encore pendants d'autre part. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le développement, lorsqu'il se veut durable, suppose en plus de ses composantes économiques et sociales un volet environnemental sans lequel il ne saurait être.
Strong, appropriate
il est plus que
support
jamais
must be
temps
given to our
de
country.
poursuivre nos efforts conjugués pour faire
Besides
face
the
de façon
efforts
idoine à la
that
problématique
we
des changements
ourselves are
climatiques
making in order
qui
to
constitue une
strengthen and sustain our
véritable menace
achievements
existentielle pour
and
le Bénin
effectively
du
respond
fait des effets
to
conjugués
ongoing
de la
challenges.
désertification au nord,
de l'érosion côtière et de la salinisation continue des eaux douces au sud et du dérèglement de plus en plus accentué du cycle des saisons sur l'ensemble du territoire national. Dans ce contexte, le Bénin fonde de grands espoirs sur la COP27 qui aura lieu en novembre prochain à Sharm el-Sheikh en Égypte et en appelle à l'ensemble de la communauté des nations pour des discussions fructueuses et des résultats à la taille des enjeux et susceptibles de restaurer l'espoir. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, en ce qui concerne la promotion et la protection des droits de l'homme, le Bénin, sur le plan international et à la faveur du début cette année de son mandat en qualité de membre du Conseil des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies, apporte et continuera d'apporter sa contribution pour promouvoir et faciliter activement toutes les initiatives concourant à l'atteinte des objectifs de développement durable qui constituent le moyen le plus sûr pour garantir le respect des droits de la personne humaine. Au plan national, entre autres actions, le Bénin s'investit dans la mobilisation à travers différentes stratégies des ressources devant permettre aux populations les plus vulnérables d'avoir accès à un système alimentaire adéquat, à une éducation de santé, à des soins de santé qui protègent tous, y compris les plus démunis, à l'eau potable, à l'énergie électrique et aux énergies propres. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, face aux multiples défis qui nous interpellent, l'heure est plus que jamais à la nécessité de la préservation, voire du renforcement du multilatéralisme. Un multilatéralisme véritablement inclusif et fondé sur des règles équitables et valables pour tous, comme projet de réflexion et d'action pour apporter des solutions viables et globales. Dans ce cadre, le Bénin apporte tout son soutien aux initiatives diplomatiques en cours au sein des Nations Unies afin de trouver des solutions pacifiques, durables et équitables à la question de la création d'un État palestinien
to preserve and strengthen multilateralism, which is truly inclusive and based on fair rules, which apply to all.
Aux efforts pour trouver une solution définitive à la question du Sahara occidental, en capitalisant les acquis du processus politique tenu sous les auspices du secrétaire général des Nations Unies qui vise à parvenir à une solution de compromis dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre des résolutions pertinentes du Conseil de sécurité. À la question du blocus économique, commercial et financier imposé à Cuba, sur laquelle le Bénin s'associe aux déclarations pertinentes de la communauté des États d'Amérique latine et des Caraïbes d'une part, ainsi qu'à la résolution adoptée par la 35e session ordinaire de l'Union africaine tenue en février 2022 à Addis Abeba d'autre part, pour en appeler à la nécessité de mettre fin au dit blocus au nom de la promotion de la paix et du développement. Mieux, nous appelons de nos vœux la normalisation des relations entre Cuba et les États-Unis d'Amérique, qui sont deux partenaires chers au Bénin. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, comme l'a souligné le secrétaire général dans son rapport intitulé le programme commun, l'histoire ancienne et récente de l'humanité démontre à souhait qu'elle est capable de grandes choses lorsqu'elle agit unie. Et il est plus que jamais question pour l'humanité de faire un choix fatidique entre rester passif et favoriser la poursuite du développement en cours et agir résolument pour bâtir un avenir meilleur, plus vert et plus sûr. Je demeure convaincu que nous entendrons la voix de la raison en faveur de l'action pour un monde meilleur. Le thème de la présente session prend toute sa valeur, puisqu'à un moment justement qualifié de décisif, il nous convie à trouver des solutions transformatrices face à des défis interdépendants. Ceci n'est possible que sous réserve de partenariats multidimensionnels impliquant gouvernements, organisations multilatérales, secteur privé et société civile avec comme objectif commun, dans un esprit de responsabilité partagée, des actions hardies pour la mise en œuvre diligente des accords existants, notamment l'atteinte des objectifs de développement durable. C'est donc sur cet appel à l'action responsable et avec foi en notre capacité à œuvrer conjointement à relever les défis qui nous interpellent, que je souhaite plein succès aux travaux de la 77e session de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, en vous assurant de la disponibilité de ma délégation à ne ménager aucun effort pour donner suite, conjointement avec les membres aux engagements pris dans le cadre de la 15e session de développement durable à l'horizon 2030.
My delegation is prepared to make every effort to follow up on our commitments and those of all members to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Long live multilateral cooperation, more robust, inclusive, and consistent to serve sustainable development. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the chair of the delegation of Benin. I now give the floor to His Excellency Song Kim, chair of the delegation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
우이장 선생,
Mr. President,
사무총장 선생.